4 p.m. I'm going to call this meeting of the Putnam County Planning Commission to order. I want to thank everyone for being here, and I want to let you know that we appreciate your public participation, and we appreciate your exercising your civic duties and responsibilities. There's several things about this meeting we're going to be doing a little bit differently than what we've done in the past, and I'm going to go on record at noting these things. The first is, we're going to start off with Mr. Hafner's going to read our Code of Ethics, which is what we ascribe to as members of the Planning Board. And then I will go through our legal responsibilities. We also will declare any ex parte communications or conflicts of interest before we move into the first cases. The way the cases normally run is we'll have the staff report questions of staff. The applicant or the applicant's agent will be given a chance to speak. Again, questions of the applicant's agent. Then we open the public comment portion of the hearing, and anyone wanting to speak for or against any of the cases that are coming before us today will be given a chance to speak. We're asking everyone who wants to speak to please fill out an orange speaker card so we have a record that you're coming forward. With the third case that we're going to have today, we will do a little differently. After the owner agent has spoken, anyone wishing to speak in favor of this application will be given a chance to speak for 3 minutes, which is our normal standard procedure. And then we will bring one of the people up who has a great deal of history with this project in speaking, and giving her 10 minutes because she's representing a neighborhood. If there's no one else wishing to speak after that time, we will bring the owner back up and allow the owner to respond to any concerns or questions that have been raised throughout that time. And right now, it looks like we'll probably give you 5 minutes, Skeet. So that's how the meeting is going to run. We've got 2 cases coming up before we go into the third one. So let's go get underway. Mr. Hafner?
As a member of the Putnam County Planning Commission, I pledge to come to meeting prepared for the items on the agenda, willing and ready to listen carefully and courteously to make informed decisions based on the facts presented and what I feel is in the best interest of the people and businesses of Putnam County. I will refrain from unnecessary interruptions, and I will be appreciative of the respectful toward applicants, members of staff, and other members of this commission. I will support the decisions made by the majority, and I will be fair and objective in all that I do as a member of the Putnam County Planning Commission.
Thank you, sir. This is a public hearing, and we're the Putnam County Planning Commission. We're the designated local planning agency for the county as described under Title 11, Chapter 163 of the Florida statutes, and we function under the authority of Articles 11 and 12 of the Putnam County Land Development Code. The primary responsibility of the Commission is to serve as an advisory body to hear and make recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners on matters related to provisions of and proposed amendments to the Putnam County Comprehensive Plan and the Putnam County Land Development Code. The members of this board will review each application and make a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners at a regularly scheduled meeting, and it's not November 23rd. I don't think we can get that ready in 14 days. I believe it's December 14th, isn't it, Gabriel?
Yes. Yes, it is. It's
Yes.
December.
So anything we do will be moved on to the Board of County Commissioners for a December 14th hearing. Procedurally, we'll call each case by name and number. A member of staff will then briefly explain to us the nature of each request. We will take comments from the applicant or their representative, followed by public comments concerning the request. Please direct all questions to the Commission and not other people in the audience. Before speaking, we will ask each person to be recognized, come forward to the lectern, and identify his or herself by name and address. After all persons wishing to speak have been heard, we will entertain a motion from the Commission. This motion will be voted on by Commission members and become our recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners. The Board of County Commissioners will make the final determination regarding this application, and again, that will be on December 14th. I need to ask, has there been any ex parte communication between anyone on the board and any one of the applicants coming before us today?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, please tell us the nature of that.
I went to visit, not this case, but the last one,
Put your mic on, Ken. There you go. You went to visit,
I went to visit the property. And
which property are we talking about?
the third one,
The third case on our...
third case.
Okay,
And when I pulled up, Skeet pulled up right after, a minute after I got there, and I rode around with him. He showed me what was there.
okay. Does that have any impact on how you will vote today?
No, I'd never been there before.
I understand. Some of us would love to be out in the woods, but just don't go out in the woods and play with those toys. But a lot of people do. Any other ex parte communication? Aaron?
I spoke to Skeet on the phone just to get access to the property. So,
Got to get closer.
no, I spoke to Skeet on the phone just to have access to the property. I didn't know if it would be locked when I got there, and that was the extent of the conversation. He said it would be open, so,
And is that going to affect, is that going to in any way impact your vote?
no, not at all.
I also was approached by one of the members of the Board of County Commissioners who entreated me to help make this happen for our case number 3. And Mr. Perry was standing there when that happened. And I can assure you that his comments to me will not impact anything that I think, say, or do concerning this case. Mr. Perry, any questions you have for any of us?
No, ma'am, I do not.
Okay. Does anyone have a conflict of interest with one of the either of the cases that we have coming before us, either of the properties? All right. With that being said, we will now move on to Small Map Amendment 21001. Wendy?
This application is for David and Mary Jean Smith. It's a small-scale map amendment from rural residential to rural center on a single parcel containing .398 plus minus acres to allow neighborhood commercial and its uses. The property is located at 1443 County Road 309, Georgetown. The parcel currently is designated rural residential. Of course, it's .39 acres, contains 87 feet of frontage on County Road 309, and it is currently vacant. This is an aerial photo of the parcel. This is the current land use and current zoning. The comprehensive plan for rural residential states that this category consists of areas located adjacent to municipalities and areas designated urban service, urban reserve, and rural center. Areas interspersed with the active agricultural areas and areas around water bodies. Neighborhood commercial uses may be permitted when approved through a PUD zoning district in compliance with the requirements of a PUD. Now, the rural center allows for consists of areas in the county where focal points and of existing and future development are in rural areas of the county. Rural centers typically include some of all of the following: intersection of two rural collectors or arterial roadways, commercial buildings, existing public and community buildings. Neighborhood commercial development and community commercial development are permitted. This site and standard location uses and policies of A193, A5C under the commercial future land use category shall apply. In addition to the commercial uses future commercial uses will be discouraged from locating a strip pattern along roadways. Types of commercial uses and site development standards are subject to further regulation by the commercial zoning district standards provided in the Land Development Code. This parcel is also subject to the rezoning request. The existing land use designation of rural residential limits commercial to planned unit developments. The parcel has access to County Road 309, a major a collector designated road and adopted level of service D, and operates acceptably. The surrounding land uses consist primarily of neighborhood supporting commercial uses and low-density residential uses. Established commercial uses in the vicinity include the Georgetown Post Office, the Georgetown United Methodist Church, Causey Cemetery, a marina and DJ Marine and Boat Storage Facility, which is currently in the process of development. The findings and the recommendations: the staff find that the proposed amendment is consistent with the comprehensive plan, would be consistent with the locational requirements for C1 zoning, compatible with the surrounding uses. Staff recommends approval of the request to amend the future land use map from rural residential to rural center for the subject parcel.
Does anyone on the board have questions of staff? Okay. Is the owner applicant present? Would you like to come forth and speak?
David Smith, 110 Bass Road. It's a parcel between the.
Bass Road where?
Georgetown, Florida,
Okay, thank you. We have to have it for the
in the
record.
neighborhood. It's a parcel between the post office and the cemetery right on, with road frontage on 309. So I'm really here to just answer any questions. What we want to do is put an office there for our environmental consulting firm.
Okay.
But if you have any questions, I'm here.
Are there any questions of the applicant owner? Okay, hearing none. Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak either for or against this particular application? Okay, hearing none, I'll bring it back to the board for discussion, motion, and vote. What are your thoughts, folks?
I'm ready to make a motion to approve it.
Okay.
What is the case number? I'm sorry, I don't have it.
SM 21001.
SM 21001, as it's consistent with our goals, plans, and objectives.
I'll second it.
Okay, Mr. Hafner has seconded it. Any further discussion?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
I live on County Road 309, about a mile away from this proposed site. This site is a very small piece of property located between the cemetery and the church.
Post office.
Post office.
It's on a curve, and the curve is a no-see curve. In other words, if you come on it from the post office side and try to look down to the east, which is east in that area, you can't see anybody coming to approach you. If you're coming the other way, when you're coming out of the post office, you can't see anybody coming around that curve. So it is the opinion of myself, anyway, and a few of the residents that have seen the signs, that this is not the right place to put any commercial establishment. I understand the rural center, and I understand getting the zoning down to where they're trying to get it down to put some kind of a building there for development and water services. I usually check on these properties when they come up before the planning commission or our board to find out who the owners are, where they came from, et cetera. And what I found out yesterday was the property had just been acquired back in August on a tax deed, which doesn't really matter. It's just the fact that I more was concerned that it was going to be kind of a flip on property rather than a real change for a business coming into our community. So it had me a little bit concerned. But regardless of that, I believe it's not the right spot to put any establishment that's going to bring in traffic of any kind on that curve. I feel it will be dangerous, and I think it'll be an accident just waiting to happen. So because of that, I wouldn't vote for it.
Okay. At this point, Mr. Smith, can you talk to us about the amount of traffic that will be in and out of your facility?
Very minimal. It's just going to be a 1,200 square foot office, I think. Something like that, with maybe 4 employees, and we have no customers at all. And I understand what you're saying about the visibility, but if we can come in, we could clear off some of those trees that's actually causing the problem on this property. You know, the post office is clear, but then, and so is the cemetery, but this is very wooded. And we could clear back a 20-foot buffer or whatever is appropriate, so you could see better coming around that curve.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Does that help, Tom?
I understand what can be done. Again, we've changed, recommended zoning changes on many, many pieces of property. And there's some that just stay exactly the same as what we saw before we made the recommendation. This particular property has approximately 40 trees on it. They do come right up to the road. They are tall, tall trees. It's a forest. And the opinion of some of the residents that saw the signs, they're very difficult to see, by the way, because you go around
On the curve, and right.
you don't see them. But the few calls that I did say, we're very concerned about putting any retail on this street, because they didn't know what the retail was going to be. It could have been any one of 4 or 5 different categories from what was in the packet.
Sure.
Not until I got here did I see anything about what the petitioner proposed. But still in all, it's going to be something that's going to be controversial. I know there'll be people that are going to be more concerned when it comes up to front of the commission, so I just thought I'd just express the opinions. One is mine, as well as the few people that have seen the signs and talked to me over the telephone just yesterday and today, because I was at a commission over the weekend and Monday.
Well, we appreciate
That's my
that.
opinion. I will not go for this project in this particular site. It's a great idea, but it can go someplace else.
Thank you, Tom.
Madam Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
may I add something?
Certainly.
Any development would have to go first before the Development Review Committee, which at that time, visibility, road accessibility, and all of those items are reviewed. So the visual triangle, how the driveway is coming off, that will all be part of the review during the development review of any kind of development, except for a single-family home
Right.
that would go on that property.
Thank you, ma'am. Anybody else have a question for staff or a concern about this project before we bring it to a vote? Hearing none, I will call for the question. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Opposed.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay.
The motion has passed, and now we're going to move on to R21-020. Don't have my glasses on for that one.
This again is for David and Mary Jean Smith. This is the companion application for the project. This is a zoning map amendment for a single parcel of .39 acres from residential R1 to neighborhood commercial C1. The property is located at 1443 County Road 309, Georgetown. The parcel will be designated rural center by the time this goes through, because we did the first one first. And the parcel, it's .39 acres, contains 87 feet of frontage along 309. The property is vacant. Again, the aerial, the future land use, the current zoning district. The comprehensive plan, just as I had mentioned within the other portion, the rural center allows for neighborhood commercial development and community commercial development. The existing R1 zoning provides a residential zoning district for use primarily in rural residential, rural center, urban service, and urban reserve land use classifications. The purpose of the C1 district is to provide a commercial, for the proposed, the C1 zoning district, is to provide a commercial zoning district for the neighborhood commercial land use in rural center, urban reserve, and urban service. The use categories allowed in the C1 district are retail sales, general and food, services except tattoo parlors, office, and child care and adult daycare centers. So it's a very limited availability within that district. The future land use designation for the parcel, if the companion comprehensive plan map amendment is approved, would be rural center. Pursuant to the policy of neighborhood commercial development is permitted. The parcel has access to 309, a major collector designated road, and it has an adopted level of service of D. The surrounding land use consists of the neighboring supporting commercial uses, just as I had mentioned before, the post office, the cemetery, the church. And staff finds that the rezoning of C1 is consistent with the comprehensive plan, consistent with the locational requirements of the C1 zoning district, and compatible with the surrounding land use. The staff recommends approval of the request to amend the zoning map from R1 to neighborhood commercial C1 for the subject parcel.
Thank you, Wendy. Any questions of staff? Mr. Smith, do you have anything you'd like to add? Same thing. Okay, thank you. Bring it back to the board then. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak either for or against this application? Seeing none, bring it back to the board. Thoughts and comments on the board? Tom,
Same objection.
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments on this particular application? Okay, hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
We gotta make a motion first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Aaron. Just getting ahead of myself. Do I hear a motion? Okay. Don't all jump at once. Do we want
I'll make a motion to approve,
R21?
R21-020, as it is consistent with our goals and objectives of
Thank you.
comprehensive plan.
And Jerry seconds that. All right. Now I can call for the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. All opposed?
Opposed.
Thank you, sir. All right, carries by a vote of 6-1. Wendy, thank you very much for all of your excellent work. All right,
Permission to approach
you need to,
DeSantis?
certainly.
I'll give you my phone number. We want to be an asset to the
Okay.
community, not a detriment.
Thank you.
And call me with any concerns you have or
Will
anything
do.
you want to talk about.
Appreciate it.
Okay, let the record reflect that Mr. Smith has asked Mr. DeSantis to please be in touch with him about any concerns, and gave him his phone number. Thank you. Y'all are keeping me honest this afternoon. We're going to do a little changing of the guard up at the desk, and Gabriel is going to present the next case.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This item is PUD number 20-006. I'm going to go through a presentation here, and then I'll move back over there because I have my red line version of the copy over there. The applicant has requested to amend the Magnolia Dunes PUD to provide for a second entrance and exit to help move traffic off and on of County Road 310 more effectively. Staff supports the request to add an additional ingress and egress point to facilitate access to and circulation within the development. Comprehensive Plan Future Land Use Element Policy A19310F states that rural recreational uses are permitted within the agricultural future land use category. The policy states that the location, scale, and intensity of rural recreational uses shall be compatible with the overall character of the existing and future development of the area. The same policy additionally mentions the importance of ensuring natural resource protection and the mitigation of off-site traffic and noise impacts. In order to further this policy, staff has proposed revisions to the allowed uses and conditions, development standards, and enforcement standards of the Magnolia Dunes planned unit development. These staff recommended changes are intended to further implement the stated policy by providing additional protections to the environmentally sensitive areas on the site and to assist in the mitigation of off-site traffic and noise impacts. They are additionally intended to protect the public welfare, regulate uses that have been introduced into the PUD that are not currently permitted, maintain compatibility of the PUD with the surrounding area, and clarify ambiguities in the existing ordinance. I'm happy to go through any questions that the Commission has on the specific changes that we made. The staff recommendation is that the proposed amendment to the PUD ordinance advances the goals, objectives, and policies of the Putnam County Comprehensive Plan, and staff recommends approval of the request to amend the Magnolia Dunes PUD, providing for a second exit and entrance, and providing for revisions to the allowed uses and conditions on such uses, development standards, and enforcement standards of the Magnolia Dunes PUD as shown on the proposed ordinance attached. I'll briefly go
Okay.
through this slideshow. This is just an aerial image of the PUD property, a future land use map. The entire property is agricultural too. The zoning map. Special flood hazard areas. There should be a wetlands map within the ordinance as well. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
What is the LOS on County Road 310?
It's a rural collector, and that's a D,
Okay,
the adopted LOS.
okay. Do we have any traffic counts out there to know how this falls within the capacity of a level D LOS?
We'd have to look at our 2019 traffic study that the county performed. I'm not certain whether we do, but I have a feeling that we may have some data, but it may not be complete.
Okay. That would be something that would be brought up by the DRC, wouldn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Where exactly is he gonna put the second entrance from the main entrance?
So that's not shown on the master site plan currently, but that will be determined at the time of development review, and I'm sure the applicant would be able to state the location.
Okay.
Okay. Another question I have is, at the last time we had this come before us in 2019, there was a gentleman who came forward and said that he owned a couple of lots within that subdivision that was basically vacated for this PUD to be established in 2008. Does the applicant own all of the lots in that subdivision at this time?
No, ma'am, and only a portion of that subdivision has been vacated, so there are still some lots that are owned by others that are totally contained within the bounds of the PUD.
And do those other people and owners have access to their properties?
I'm not certain of that because I don't know where their properties are on the ground.
Okay.
There is legal access on the plat, but whether something's obstructing it, I don't know.
We don't have an overlay on that, okay. Any other questions of staff at this point? Joel?
I don't know if my mic, is it on?
Yeah, maybe you need to use the one next to you. Turn it on. Turn it on, yeah. Oh, it's on?
Okay. It looked green to me. I don't see how that somebody can put a PUD on a piece of property whenever it surrounds other pieces of property and kind of landlocks those. I'm having a hard time comprehending that.
So the PUD would have to guarantee access to those properties. The plat itself guarantees it on paper, but there would be no obstruction, there could be no obstructions to those properties.
Is that reflected in the revised PUD?
Because of the difficulty of knowing exactly where those properties are on the site and the different, the topography out there, it would be almost, unless the applicant were to survey every single one of those properties, it would be very difficult for staff to know whether anything on that master plan obstructs those properties, access to those properties, because we would have to have the plat overlain on the master plan exactly as the lines conform to each other, and then ground truth that and make sure that there isn't anything in the way of the platted right-of-way leading to the out parcels.
Are any of those pieces of property being used to ride their four-wheelers or whatever they do out there? And how many pieces are there?
I tried to count them. Some of them are so small, but I counted like around 20 pieces. But that may not be entirely accurate because some of them are just slivers of half pieces of lots that have been sold off without coming through the lot split process or anything like that. And what was your first question?
How many of them were there, and are they being used now, the lots that's not part of the PUD? I understood you to say that the PUD does not include the lots that's not owned by the owner, is that correct?
Correct.
So there are legal descriptions of them.
Correct.
Yeah, so they would need to be surveyed out and,
But whether they're being used currently, I don't know. I know that we have received some comments from citizens that their properties were being used for that verbally, but I don't know. There'd be no way for us to tell unless we had them surveyed, or the applicant or the owners had them surveyed to show us exactly where they are.
Would that be something that could be inserted into the PUD agreement? Could or
I
should?
don't believe so because it really doesn't. You could insert something like the bounds of the PUD should be fenced, which I think is in there already. If you wanted to recommend that include the boundaries of those parcels, yes, but to require a surveying of those parcels when those parcels are not owned by the PUD applicant, I don't think would be permissible in the PUD.
But the PUD boundaries would be permissible.
Correct, and so if you approach it in that manner, yes. If the applicant is required to survey, or excuse me, to fence off the boundaries, including the boundaries around those small lots for the purposes of protecting other properties from encroachment, then yes, that's something that could be inserted into the PUD. And I think there is a portion of the PUD that does have a requirement for fencing of the boundaries.
Right. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Gabriel, is this, I don't know if you use the same terminology as I use, what we would call a paper subdivision?
It is, yes, sir. It's an antiquated subdivision that was never developed.
And the subject lots are all non-buildable?
I haven't done an analysis of that, but I would assume that most of them are not currently buildable because of the sizes and because
No
you
infrastructure
never get a
neither.
septic tank on them. What's that?
There's no infrastructure neither,
No,
correct?
sir.
So when you say that the applicant, I have a similar piece. Joe's not here today, but Roberts Ranch, I own several pieces inside Roberts Ranch. And they have no problem granting me access to go to my lots if we so choose. We can't use the lots for anything. They're not usable, which these are not usable either. But you mentioned that Skeet basically guarantees, if I owned one, say I was one of the owners, he would guarantee my right to be able to get to my property.
It would be a requirement of the owner that currently owns the rights-of-way. And that's another question, because rights-of-way, they're dedicated on the plat, but they were never taken in by the county via deed, so that's kind of a gray area.
Well, in my experience in that field, those right-of-ways, even though they're not there on the ground, they're on paper.
They are.
Therefore, as long as I can show you where they are, nobody can stop me from walking down a road that's not there.
That's correct. That would be your legal access
Yes.
for those lots.
And these were obviously way before 1992 when the comp plan was first adopted. So these were grandfathered in as being subpar lots.
Well, I wouldn't use the word
I know.
grandfathered, but yeah, they were platted, and they would never meet our platting regulations now.
Right, today.
So basically, it's a civil matter between the Magnolia Dunes and them if they are using any of their property
Yes, ma'am.
for, okay. That's
Same thing we said last time with the gentleman who came up. That's for the courts to decide, not for us. We can put something in the PUD regarding it, but we can't do anything about their rights.
But if the PUD says that the boundaries of the PUD has to be fenced, then that would make it where that those lots should be fenced because they're boundaries of the PUD, right? And I just look at it as if I owned a piece of property in there, and I know that the people out there don't have a whole lot of money that own those, and they'd probably love to sell them, probably for a pretty cheap price. But it just seems to me that I would hate knowing I'm paying taxes on a piece of property that somebody else is using day to day, and they're making money off of using my piece of property, and there's nothing I can do about it. You know, I wouldn't have the money to fight a big guy, if you will, and I'm not saying you're a big guy, but I think from our standpoint, we should protect residents, shouldn't we? I mean, somewhat. I mean, I know it's a legal matter, I agree with that, but if the PUD says that they need to be fenced, they should be fenced. Asking.
Well, and one of our charges is to protect the public welfare. So that, protect property rights and public welfare. So that's a plausibility, what you're saying there. Any other questions you have of Gabriel at this point before he moves into the review of the PUD?
To answer your question, Mr. Dantzler, I would agree with that interpretation of the fencing requirement. If the boundaries have to be fenced, then it should include boundaries within the PUD.
So that's something we can add as an amendment when we get to the PUD. All right.
I'll have to look at the PUD language right now to see if it suffices, but if the commission would like to add additional language, that's within your
From
prerogative.
what I understood, you said it was already in there that the boundaries of the PUD has to be fenced.
That's correct.
Okay, so if it's already a rule, then it's
Maybe
just,
it needs to be
maybe
clarified a
it
little
needs to
bit
be
so it's
clarified or enforced.
not
yeah.
ambiguous.
Right.
Okay. Let's move on to the review of the PUD. We'll give Gabriel a chance to check, to shift gears here. And we're on the ordinance, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
If that's what you would like.
Well, now let's go through the actual PUD, and not the ordinance. They're basically identical.
Yes, ma'am. The text of the PUD will be in the ordinance.
So it starts on page 1 of 22, is that correct?
Just a moment
This is
here.
the ordinance.
Mine says 1 of 30.
Okay, you
I
want to do?
think you're looking for the red line version, Susan, or?
Yeah. Yeah, I was looking for the red line version. I think that's the one we need to look at. So that's the 1 of 22.
Correct. That's right.
Okay. Proceed, sir. Are we going to have this on our screens, or you're just going to walk us through it?
I can walk you through it. I don't know if you can get this pulled up on your screens or not. Do you not have access to your electronic agenda up there?
No, we're looking at the aerial view right now of the map. Jacob, I think your name is being called. Can you help us out? Because some of us don't have our packets. Bear with us, folks. We'll get there.
Somehow we lost 8 pages.
Smaller print.
Yeah, you're true.
Plus, there's a lot that's been stricken. So, but that one's been added, so I don't know. Yeah. I hope everybody's enjoying this wonderful weather we're having right now. It's been such a wonderful respite from what we were having.
Yeah, it is.
If you can make that bigger for us, we'd love it.
Yes, ma'am. Is that big enough, or?
Yes.
Okay.
I think we can all see that now, can't we?
Yes, oh, yeah.
All right, take us through it.
Okay, so the first few changes are simply the addition and subtraction of whereas clauses. So the first subtraction is overflow parking on a parcel that was never permitted to have overflow parking because of a conservation easement. So 2 whereas clauses have been added at the request of the applicant. They really don't provide much substance other than explaining the reasoning for the PUD zoning, which is the same that's stated in the LDC or similar language. So airboat racing has been removed entirely from the PUD at the request of the applicant. And this part here is simply the justification for the PUD, so we're not to the uses yet. Sections were updated to conform to the new sections in the, on the Municode website. The legal description was updated and removed and placed as an exhibit towards the end. Definitions were added. So a number of additional definitions for master plan, all-terrain vehicle, recreational off-road vehicle, vehicle itself, enforcement officer, event, jurisdictional wetlands, mud bogging, which mirrors the language in the Land Development Code. Racing was added as a use, and so it was defined. ATV and UTV riding was also defined to better delineate what ATV and UTV riding are for the purposes of this PUD, and then exhibits were adopted by reference. And so the allowed uses, mud bogging is to be permitted within the so-called pit, and also the any other areas designated on the master plan. The only other area would be RPM Alley, which is a new area that's introduced into this PUD. It is present on the site now. The all-terrain vehicle and motorcycle riding was not changed, simply the acreage was removed because it was ambiguous. It wasn't really very enforceable in that manner, so it was removed and simply referred to as shown as on the master plan. Racing of vehicles was added for 2 events. That restriction for 2 events is on the master plan. On the last page of the master plan, I think it's the 4th condition. Campsite and cabin use remains, as always, but the same change was made to remove acreage. General agriculture and silviculture use is allowable within the boundaries of the entire PUD. No longer is it restricted simply to 980 acres. Mobile vendors may operate within an area designated on the master plan. Airboat racing was removed. Recreational vehicle parking, the code section was updated there and is limited to areas delineated on the master plan. Artificial ponds were added at the request of the applicant as a use. 1 restaurant was added at the request of the applicant as a use. The restaurant is currently in place. 1 camp store was added as a use. And vehicle rentals and repairs is an accessory use to the uses permitted within the PUD in an area delineated on the master plan. Okay. Then what follows is conditions on the allowed uses. Bear with me here because this is going to be quite intensive trying to explain what was removed and what was added and what was retained. So a clarification was added that riding, racing, and mud bogging of any vehicle within jurisdictional wetlands and lake bottoms is strictly prohibited. Clarification was added also that ATV and UTV trails and riding will be a minimum of 100 feet from the property lines, and an additional protection on the wetlands and lake bottoms was added so that mud bogging could not occur within 100 feet of the jurisdictional wetlands and lake bottoms, except as exempted below. So in RPM Alley, because RPM Alley is nestled between two wetlands, we did the very minimum of the wetlands buffer that is required by the Land Development Code, and that's 25. Riding of trucks is prohibited within RPM Alley. No new riding areas shall be established anywhere in the PUD within 100 feet of jurisdictional wetlands and lake bottoms. Okay, so the protections on wetlands and lake bottoms were enhanced. Jurisdictional wetlands and lake bottoms within 100 feet of an existing riding area shall be, so this is for existing, that already encroach within that 100 feet. The 100 feet is an additional protection that was added, so this is sort of a grandfathering of those areas so that they would not be in violation of the PUD. So those areas shall be clearly labeled with signage and protected along the required setback with barriers consisting of any of the following components: fully opaque vegetative screening consisting of existing vegetation and/or planted landscaping and field and/or vinyl fences. Barriers are required to measure a minimum consistent height of no less than 4 feet and shall be approved by Planning and Development Services prior to installation. Jurisdictional wetlands and lake bottoms greater than 100 feet of a riding area shall be labeled with signage, but the described barriers shall not be required to be installed. Signage verbiage shall state a prohibition of any riding activity within jurisdictional wetlands and lake bottoms. In lieu of the required barriers, and this was added at the request of the applicant, the owner may annually submit monitoring reports submitted to the St. Johns River Water Management District for review by Planning and Development Services to ensure that additional impacts to jurisdictional wetlands and lake bottoms have not occurred where were not permitted by the St. Johns River Water Management District. That word property should not be there. Okay, so an old restriction on ATV and UTV riding, that it be at least 25 feet, was removed because it was enhanced to 100 feet. And just a note on the option above for the protection, staff believes that if we receive an annual report at the same time each year and it does not show any additional impacts, and so St. Johns River Water Management District has monitoring stations out there now, and if we don't show any impacts, then we know that the barriers are not required. If there are impacts, then the barriers would be required.
Would that be a codes violation?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Motorcycle engaged racing. So we included this within the wetland and lake bottom setbacks applicable to ATV and UTV areas in subsection B above. And motorcycle engaged racing shall not start before 8 a.m. and shall cease no later than 5:30 p.m. Building setbacks from all abutting property lines. So the side and rear setbacks were increased to 100 to conform to the front setback requirement. So it was formerly 50. However, we did add another provision to per se grandfather existing structures. So the setbacks shall be applicable to structures and buildings placed on the property after the enactment of the present ordinance. Existing properly permitted structures and buildings in place at the time of enactment may continue to abide by the former 50-foot side and rear setbacks, just so that those existing structures would not be subject to a violation. Okay, racing as allowed herein shall consist only of races between similar vehicles, such as a race consisting of all ATV, UTV vehicles, or a race consisting of all motorcycles. Racing between different vehicles is prohibited. So a truck cannot compete against an ATV or a motorcycle against a truck for safety reasons. A clarification was added that any activity prohibited by a local, state, or federal agency having jurisdiction is expressly disallowed in this PUD. The prohibition on dogs was removed. Most rural recreational sites have dogs that are brought to them. Staff could see really no public benefit to prohibiting dogs.
Is there any requirement how the dogs have to be managed?
There is not, no ma'am. And staff had contemplated that, but the difficulty of enforcement of that would be just too much for what would be occurring during weekends and an outdated reference was stricken. There was an incorrect reference to a landscape buffer in section 8 that was changed to perimeter landscaping, which is what's required around a vehicle use area. The number of events has stayed the same, and the time of events has stayed the same, 8 p.m. on Friday through 8 p.m. on Sunday. The part that was stricken on number 10 is was simply moved to another part, so ATV and UTV riding is regulated in another portion that we'll get to in just a moment. Mud bogging and racing, so racing was added to number 11 as an allowed use, shall only be allowed during a Saturday or a Sunday during an event within the areas designated on the master plan. And mud bogging and racing shall not commence prior to 9:30 a.m. and not extend beyond 5:30 p.m. Again, airboat racing conditions were removed. ATV and UTV riding shall be allowed every day of the year as it was previously. ATV and UTV riding shall not commence before 8 a.m. and not extend beyond 8 p.m. With the exception that during an event, ATV and UTV riding shall be permitted for the duration of the event, as stipulated in subsection 10 above. 13, this was merely clarified, but the essence of the sound level regulation remains the same as previous. 14 is a restatement of what was stated previously in the PUD regarding staffing of fire and/or EMS and law enforcement personnel at events, but the language has been made clearer. Number 16 stricken and simply moved above where ATV and UTV riding is regulated. 19 was stricken as well. Staff did not really see any purpose to fencing the mud bogging area. Given that the mud bogging area has to be in mud and the area is clearly delineated by the mud, so a fence might lead to more public safety issues where somebody gets caught on the fence. And okay, so in number 17, the overflow parking provision was stricken again because the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services has a conservation easement on that land, and they do not permit any kind of activity on that land other than agriculture and passive uses. 19 states that there will be 2 access points permitted for the development, meeting the standards of the code, each providing ingress and egress entrances to the PUD as designated on the master plan. A driveway permit for each access shall be obtained. 20 is just a clarification of language. 20A, and there was a recent conversation about this between staff and the applicant. It's possible that the 168 will be changing, but the applicant had previously requested to increase the number of 24-foot wide camper and recreational vehicle overnight parking spaces to 168 from the 29 allowed, to be included within the total 250 campsites allowed. So these spaces are to have electrical and water hookups, and the first 29 spaces will not be required to be connected to the central sanitary sewer system, simply to grandfather or to respect what was allowed for the first 29.
Will the others have connection to sanitary sewer?
Under this writing, yes, ma'am,
Good,
they would.
okay.
A maximum of 250 campsites within the area designated as camping areas are allowed. The rest has not changed there. The camping area will be separate from the vehicle parking area. This was already contained within the PUD, but a clarification was added that camping and overnight stays of any kind is expressly prohibited in the vehicle parking areas. So camping areas are regulated by the LDC, and they have a minimum dimensional standard and access standards, and so placing campers or RVs in a parking lot is not an efficient or an orderly way of organizing an RV park for safety purposes and for access purposes. This was, G on page 12 was added to clarify that camping and recreational vehicle areas shall be designed and constructed in accordance with the regulations for overnight recreational vehicle parks in LDC section 45-196 and for primitive camping for the primitive camping areas in LDC 45-197. Compliance will be demonstrated on the site development plans submitted for development review and prior to issuance of a final development order. The final development order is what is issued once all conditions and revisions are made to the site development plans as requested by the Development Review Committee. Number 24, this was also addition of language. It states the same thing, but it's clarifying what the requirements are prior to commencement of use. And I'll read through that. A specific land use and/or development permitted under this ordinance shall not commence prior to issuance of a final development order pursuant to development plan review as required by the LDC, final technical review, which is issuance of a construction permit by the building division, and approval of all applicable local and state departments and agencies. During development review, issuance of a final development order may be conditioned upon construction of facility improvements, such as public roadway improvements, concurrent with the development needs and impacts. Any such improvements shall be required to be shown on the final site development plans prior to issuance of a final development order and shall be constructed at the expense of the owner of the PUD. All of that is contained within the comprehensive plan and the land development code. Failure to comply with this section shall result in suspension of the events allowed herein until compliance is conclusively demonstrated by the owner. A regulation on vehicle rentals and repairs was added, since that was an added use, and those shall be limited to events as allowed herein. I believe the applicant will be proposing a slight change to this, which staff would not be opposed to allow vehicle rentals every day of the year, but repairs would remain only limited to events. Staff has no problem with that. The storage, disposal, and spillage of oil and other hazardous substances is strictly prohibited on the site. Oil and other hazardous substances shall be properly contained and disposed of as stipulated by the Putnam County Code of Ordinances, state statute and regulations, and federal law and regulations. We're almost at the end. C, expansion of the boundaries of this PUD. So this was added simply to clarify that lands that are not presently zoned PUD and were not part of this application may not be used for the PUD uses. So including incorporation of lands entirely surrounded by the PUD shall be processed as an amendment to the PUD prior to the use of those lands for activities herein permitted. Such amendment shall include a revision to the approved master plan clearly designating activities permitted within lands to be incorporated into the PUD. D, the Department of Planning and Development Services, the Fire Marshal, that's misspelled there, but we'll correct that, and PCSO, Putnam County Sheriff's Office, shall be allowed to inspect the PUD site for compliance with the provisions of this order at any time the facility is open to the general public upon request and acceptance by the owner and as allowed by local and state law. E, in the event of a land development code violation within the PUD, the county may initiate land development code violation proceedings and bring violations before the special magistrate. If the applicant violates conditions of the PUD ordinance or any permits from any county, state, or federal agency, the Board of County Commissioners may, in accordance with due process, schedule the project for public hearing for consideration of revocation of the PUD. And F, in the case that the exhibits adopted by reference may conflict with the provisions of the PUD ordinance, the ordinance shall prevail and govern in all respects. So in case there's something that staff missed on the master plan that does not exactly conform to the PUD ordinance, the ordinance always prevails.
Okay.
And this concludes my review of the...
Questions of Mr. Quintez?
I have a couple of things that I think are conflicting in here. I just got to get to them now. I think that racing thing,
Give us a page number.
I don't know where it is. Hang on. I think it's only mentioned on the master plan that it is limited to 2 weekends, 2 events, but it's not in the ordinance. So with that last thing saying the ordinance controls, I think that should be added.
That racing, there will only be 2 racing events per year?
Right, or however many there are that we approved before.
Those 2 motorcycle races, I think.
Right, motorcycle racing. That was it. It's on one of these pages of the,
That's one with the red lines on it.
it's on page 4 of the master plan, and a note
Right.
that says motorcycle racing is allowed during 2 events of any year. It's tiny print, so I'm blind. Anywhere, so I just think that should be incorporated in the language of the
PUD,
ordinance.
okay.
And on page 12 of 22,
And I'm sorry, would you mind giving me the page number of the first?
it's on page 4 of the master plan, but it's not specifically in the ordinance, I don't believe, unless it's there and I'm just not seeing it.
Oh, no, ma'am, it's
About
not
the
in.
motorcycle racing.
Right, it's not in there, so I'll make a note here, and if it makes it into the motion of the commission, then we can make that change. Now, how we'll present this is, we'll present this as one version that the commission recommended, and then staff's version, because staff's version can't change at this point.
Right.
Right. We understand that. Other questions of Mr. Quintez?
On page 12 of 22, I believe it's section 20, B and G. On B, it says that there's no streets, roads leading to the camping area and within the camping area are not required to be paved. But then down in G, it says that it is to be reviewed by development review. So I think those conflict. I don't know. I think development review may have say-so over that. But
Okay. Anything else? I have a few, but I'm not sure these are more probably. I know that one of the provisions is the road maintenance, or making sure the road doesn't degrade in the area of the development. One of the things that concerned me when I went out there is that the driveway to, I believe, the west, to the right, leaving the property, seems to really have been developed without people staying on the pavement. You've got a lot of loose sand that seems to be being driven over, and a little driveway has been created. Is that something we can add to have that paved by the owner, so that that access or that egress would be more stable?
For the driveway apron?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am, that's something that the planning commission can add. I'll look for the section that addresses, it's 19 on page 12, so that's something that we would add there, that both of the access points shall have paved aprons.
Okay. Because I noticed if it were wet, that would be another place for people to play. Like they do on my road when it rains real hard. Okay. At this point, Mr. Alford, you and your attorney are welcome to come forward and speak with us and then take questions from us. Notice how I said you're welcome to take questions from us. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Catherine Whittington. My address is 236 San Marco Avenue in St. Augustine, Florida, 32084. I'm here representing the owner, applicant, which is Magnolia Dunes LLC. With me here today, as you've seen, is Charles Alford, also known as Skeet Alford, and Ryan Carter with Carter Environmental Services, the project's environmental consultant who worked on the St. Johns River Water Management District permitting for the project, which has been issued. The permit is now issued. I want to say that Mr. Quintus did a great job on the staff report and his presentation and going through that very tedious change, red line, and he and his staff in helping us work through the many issues that we have resolved. The things that needed to be clarified and cleaned up and changed during this PUD, which you can tell by the red line was not easy. Just by way of background, some of you may already know this and you may not. This PUD and the Magnolia Dunes PUD, also known as Hogwaller, was originally came about because Commissioner Ed Taylor back in 2007, while he was on the board, approached Skeet and asked him to consider using some of his land for a mud bog and trail riding area in an effort to reduce widespread illegal and unregulated mud bogging and riding that was occurring all over the county in rural areas. And so he agreed, and he created and constructed the park. It has since grown and evolved into what it is today, which is a hybrid mud bog, trail riding, and campground. Sports, it's a sports entertainment event and a campground. So thus why there are so many conditions and issues that have to be addressed. And so this amendment was necessary in order to clean everything up and make everything clear what's allowed and what the conditions are. We did find some additional things since the staff report, the text that Gabriel just went through. There are basically 3 of them, and I have brought a red line that shows those 3 changes, and Skeet's going to pass them out to you, but I'm going to walk you through them.
Give us a chance to get them, okay?
I will.
Thank you, sir. Third copy. What page are we going to be on?
I'm going to tell you which pages as I walk you through them,
Okay,
if that's
good.
okay. Does everybody have them now? Okay, Gabriel, I've discussed these with Mr. Quintus and emailed him this same thing that you're
I was going to say,
receiving.
can you
Yeah,
provide it electronically for the
I
record?
did, yes.
Thank you.
So the first change is on page 4, and you'll see it in redlining. And this is some of the language that Gabriel just went over. Mud bogging, is everybody with me on page 4? Top of page 4? Mud bogging as defined herein within the pit, and we've made it clear RPM alley, rather than areas designated. Those are the 2 areas where mud bogging is allowed. In number 2, we've made it clear that ATV, UTV, and motorcycle racing shall not be considered mud bogging, which is regulated as separate use under this ordinance. So mud bogging is defined, trail riding is different than mud bogging. And it's allowed anywhere in an upland, not is specifically prohibited in wetlands, but anywhere that in an upland, even though standing water or mud might exist, because that is an occurrence that happens all the time in uplands. But that is not to be construed as mud bogging. Okay, the next one is on page 7. At the bottom. Gabriel mentioned this, that there might be a change. It said, in your version, the staff report version, it said 168, which was changed from 29. At the time, and during the last adoption of this ordinance, there were 29 that have water and electric hookups. Now, there are 56. He has a state, camping is licensed by the state of Florida Department of Health, and he has a state of Florida Department of Health license for 168, which is why he started asking for that number. But when we drilled down into it, we realized he doesn't need 168 plus 250. What he needs is the 59 that right now are there, and they have the hookups to water and electric.
Of the 29?
There are 56.
There are 56, but there are
56.
21 there now.
No, there's 56.
There's 56 there now?
And
Okay.
one of the reasons we needed to amend this, to clean this up.
Okay.
He had too many that were in this PUD, so,
Okay.
but they are in his license. So we've changed the 168 to 56 and struck the language that said, on the next page, page 8, at the top, it says the first 29 units will not be required to connect to central sanitary system. That's also been changed to 56. He has, the state of Florida doesn't require that. He has and if you need more details on this, I'll tell you right now, I'm a layperson on this issue, but he has a treatment facility, and they have dump stations. I think there are 2 of them. 2 of them, and each RV utilizes the dump stations. And then he also has a water filling area that they use for, if they need additional water.
Right.
But the 250 in the next paragraph include tents, pop-up campers, RVs that are called dry camping. Some people call it primitive camping, but it actually means they're self-contained. And so he didn't need to specifically say 168 because that 250 encompassed them. So it's fine with he couldn't go over 168 without the Department of Health revising his license. But the PUD allows 250 because it did. It always did. So if he did add any more, he'd have to go to DRC if he added any more of the campsites.
Of the dry campsites.
Right. Or even the connected ones, he'd have to go to DRC. It'd go through development review.
And your permit from the Department of Health is for all 168 sites?
Correct.
Okay.
Then the last change is on page 9, and Gabriel mentioned it. It's item 26, vehicle repairs. It did say, and rentals are limited to events. He rents just a few ATV, UTVs every day, but doesn't need the repairs every day. So that's just limited to during the events, but rentals is allowable every day. So those are the changes that I've shown you. To answer some of the questions, I think the first one we came upon, questions of staff, have to do with those slivers. They are 0.07 acre or less. They're portions, parcels of lots. They're not buildable. There is no infrastructure. And the text required the PUD, the entire PUD to be fenced. It did not specifically ask for those small little slivers to be fenced. And frankly, for him, it would be very difficult for him to do that. Where are they? They could be located on GIS and known where they are. Most of them, there's only about 20 to 25. Most of them are in the wetlands where everything's prohibited anyway. So they're not being used, obviously, if they're in the wetlands. About access to them came up. They do have legal access by the plat. They also have physical access, and he guarantees that. So they can, at any time they want to, come in and visit their sliver, wave, and do whatever they want to do on that sliver, but there's nothing that they can do with those sliver. And he has approached the owners, and he's bought several of them. Some of them just they don't want to sell it. It's a piece of property they want to keep. But I think the question of taxes being paid on them, they're beneath all the level for where taxes would be due.
There's no tax.
There's no tax, so they're not paying taxes on them. I mean, if I owned it, I'd certainly sell it. I'd rather get some money than nothing, but
29
that's their
cents,
business. Then, let me see. The next one to come up, the 2 racing events during the year that through the chair, Ms. Fortner brought up, we're happy to put that into the text between now and BCC. The chairperson, Madam Chair, brought up where you're leaving the property to the right, I think you said, and they're cutting a rut, that you would like to see that improved, paved. Which, that's one alternative, but another alternative would be he stops it from happening, blocks it off, so they can't come off that pavement. So we would ask that that be added to that condition.
Okay.
And let me see if I missed anything. Yeah.
What
Yeah, give your
happens,
name and
yeah,
address.
Mike Skeet Alford, 275 Round Lake Road, Palatka, Florida. What happens there, that is a lot of what you're seeing is from the school bus. If you look across the road, the school bus turns around at my driveway, coming from Interlochen Elementary. If you look across the road, she swings out way over there. I can take you there right now. The school bus is the one who keeps the, yes, my folks cut it off, but we're not there enough. We only use it like on big weekends, and we don't have a problem expanding the driveway over, which we try to do. But if you go and look right there, I can take you there this afternoon. You will find out where the school bus is the person who turns around there and uses that.
But you can stop that.
I'm trying to work with the school board.
Yeah.
The school bus has to turn around there, and that's the safest place. We have the biggest driveway, because that's the only place, really. She would have to go all the way to Highway 19 to turn around.
Sounds like a good deed could be done there.
I mean, school bus can turn, it's a public road, she can turn around anywhere she wants, but that's what, a lot of what you're seeing, that dirt there is a school bus, turns around there, and she cuts that corner. I don't know if I hate to ask her to stop what she's doing, because she's just trying to be safe, because she's trying to protect kids, and so I understand, so. But we don't have a problem expanding the
apron.
apron as much as we can.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think did anybody have any other questions that I didn't already cover?
I have one
I
question.
think we probably do.
Okay.
You were talking, I guess it's page 4, about motorcycles. You're not referencing the 2 races that you're allowed to have.
The reference to the races, the 2, which was just, we agreed with the planning department just recently that we would use 2 of the events of the 24, is on the note.
Okay, but this here.
It's not in here, but
Riding a motorcycle you can do every day.
yes.
Okay.
But the races are now going to be events. And we're happy to put that into the text.
Anything else from anybody else? Erin?
I have a note here, I don't know, between the master plan and Exhibit E, which is the hand-drawn map, I think.
Exhibit, oh, the campsite map?
Yeah, I want to.
Yes.
I don't remember what, I just said it.
It looks like this.
Clicked in. Yeah, I just gotta find it.
That is the, staff requested this, and it correlates with his Department of Health license.
Right, so I saw all those blue barrels when I was out there.
Blue.
Those representing each site, basically.
Blue barrels, did you say?
Trash barrels, it looked like.
Trash barrels, oh.
About 1,000 of them.
What's the question?
Those blue barrels, are
Right.
those like representing each site?
We have 320, over 320 trash cans on the whole place. Each campsite gets,
Okay.
yeah, so all the hookup sites all have their own trash can, and plus, there are over 300. I have more trash cans than anybody in Putnam County, I promise you right now.
Got a lot of blue rain barrels, that's for sure. Anything else?
I have a question back on the slivers. Whenever we came before here last time, there was a gentleman that came and brought a picture of what he had, you know, a year prior, and then he came and said, well, here's what my property looks like today. And he wasn't happy about it. And my understanding at that time, he was saying that it would be nice if he offered me a little something or something for it, and that wasn't, the understanding I had, he would be glad to sell it to you,
It
but
could be
you
one of
wasn't
the
willing
ones
to
that they
buy it.
have purchased since then, but he can answer that.
I can answer. That gentleman actually has fenced his off. He wants $10,000 for his .07 acres. That comes out to about over $184,000 an acre for his. I'm glad I've made him offers, very reasonable offers. I'm paying well over, be honest with you, some of the last ones we bought, I'm paying, you know, $40,000 or $50,000 an acre for this property. I'm paying well over market value. If he wants 10,000, I just refuse to buy it.
Well,
Yeah.
10,000 would turn in, for one, would turn into 20 for the next and 30 for the next.
So if he, excuse me, if he fenced it in, do you have to stay 100 feet away from that, from your riding? You can ride up right to it, or the way I understood
it's
the
not a
PUD
structure.
is that you had to stay 100 feet away from property lines.
It's a property
From
line.
Property lines, yeah, that's a good point. I don't know, I hadn't considered that.
That's,
You should be staying
you
100
should be
feet away
staying
from
100
property
feet
lines.
away from it if that's the case. I mean, I'm just, that's what the PUD
The
says.
100 feet, we should look at that language. The 100 feet is from wetlands, but let's look at the language on the property lines.
Madam Chair, may I address
Sir,
that?
Gabriel, yes.
Yes, Gabriel, please do.
The building setbacks, yes, from all abutting property lines, including anything contained within. So
It's 100 feet.
From a building,
that's for
Any property
building
lines,
setbacks.
including anything
Now,
contained within.
there are riding setbacks that would be applicable if, so some riding setbacks, like motorcycle engaged racing, shall maintain a minimum distance of 325 feet from the property line of any adjacent property on which there is a residential structure. None of those have residential structures, so.
Right, so it'd be,
But there is a riding setback somewhere in here.
I thought I read 100 feet is what I was thinking.
thought I did too, but.
Yeah, so the designated mud bogging and ATV, UTV trails and riding areas shall be a minimum of 100 feet from property lines. It's the same for the jurisdictional wetlands and lake bottom, so that's, yeah. So it does apply to the riding, the setbacks.
Where exactly is that
Are
fenced-in
you-
area?
yeah, do you know?
Yes, I do. It's actually up in the, in the middle of some of the camping areas. And I don't know, and Mr. Daniels, I can't think of any other place in the world where there's a setback for me using property next to your property. If I own a lot.
Setback for riding, though,
Right,
we've gone over this many
Right, yeah.
times.
Okay, well, they don't ride there. I mean, we
Okay.
can make sure they don't ride there, but it's still, I just don't, what you want me to do.
So this site that is fenced
Saying
in,
what the PUD said. I'm not
Yeah.
arguing, I'm just saying what
Well,
PUD.
the intent of this, and I think it's on page 4, item B, a minimum of 100 feet from the intent was exterior property lines is what that should have been. But as I said, this PUD was written a long time ago and it had a lot of problems.
oh, yeah. All right, so I want to make this, I want to understand this clearly. That piece of fenced-in area is sitting in the middle of your camping area?
In one of the camping areas, yes.
What's the dimensions on that sliver?
25 foot wide by 125 foot long.
Gosh.
You can't build on it, you can't do anything with it. I've offered the man way more than it's worth, and we've tried to buy it, every so often. Someone just wants to be.
If he wants a lot of money for it, then it should be taxed.
Well, you know,
That's the way I would look at it.
Well, he would be
He
if
said
he
it
paid
was
it.
taxed.
If I owned it, it would be, because it's in an area that is taxed.
Whenever he was here, he said he did pay taxes on it. I think that's what I understood. He said he paid $12, $15 a year or something, which isn't much.
I can offer a clarification on that point, Madam Chair,
Yes,
if
sir.
I may. There are some slivers out there, some of the larger ones are taxed. So I don't know how much they are, but I did pull up a property bill or tax bill on one of them just recently, so.
If, can I? If they own like 2 or 3 together, you know, but almost all those are in the wetlands where they own 2 or 3. We bought the ones that were in the RPM alley. We bought all those. And this one is the only one in the upland. Well, there's some others in uplands, but they're way up on the other hill. But most of them are in the wetlands. We have tried to buy it. We are still diligently trying to buy it. We buy them every few months. We pick them up, but people have to be reasonable. A lot of them.
Are you using
do
them
you
though? I
understand
mean,
the
are you
history that-
are you using the lots in your
I don't.
venture here?
Who would know? Not the one that's fenced off, no, sir. But just a real quick history on it. I don't know if you know, it's called Kenilworth Subdivision. It was a land scheme before the turn of the century, before the
I'm
last
aware.
century.
Yeah,
And they sold you a lot in 25 by 125, then you got 10 acres somewhere to farm for your farm, which was way off in the hinterlands, you know what I'm saying? And so this is only a plat. It's never been anything built on it. So, I mean, we're trying to buy them to survey. It's only available by a paper plat. You know, there's no surveying ever been done on it.
In 1,100 acres.
Yes, and it's a whole section. It was the whole section. And
Right.
it's-
The overlay shows it.
Yeah, you would have to, I don't know. You're talking about the survey and you're talking
No,
hundreds of thousands of
They're not
dollars.
talking about surveying. It could be GIS.
Could be geolocated.
Right.
It could be
It'd be
geolocated.
$100,000 to survey those.
Well, you've got to find a
I
benchmark.
can't believe it would be $100,000 to survey 20 lots.
The-
In a section? Yes, sir. In a whole
Bet
section?
you, I bet it's
A
close
mile
to
by a
that.
mile.
That's a big piece of property you
Big
gotta
piece of
survey.
property.
Yeah.
Okay, let's kind of move on from that.
I do have one comment on that. I do kind of think it's unreasonable to be 100 feet from these little lots for writing. I think that's kind of unreasonable of the,
Okay.
I would interpret it to be the exterior as well, but I just wanted to say that for the record.
Well, I think that was the intent when they did it.
Right.
So I think that's probably what we should probably endorse.
Okay. All right. Any other questions from any of y'all? I have a list. All right. When I was out there 2 years ago, you had something called the 1,000-acre woods.
Sorry, the 1,000-acre what?
Woods.
Woods.
Now, is that what is now RPM Alley? No. All right, where's the 1,000-acre woods?
1,000 Acre Woods is just a sign we put up that it's 1,000 acres. You know, when you go north of it's when you leave the camping area, the
Right.
common area, it's 1,000 acres out there.
So there are no trails or
No,
anything?
it's just trails, it's just open woods.
Okay, all right.
There's no particular, it's just 1,000, my media guy thought it was kind of cute from Peter Rapp, you know, from.
Right, right. Do you require reservations, or is it reservation and/or drive-up?
It's reservation.
And both.
It's both, okay. Now, do you have EMS and law enforcement out there during heavy weekend usage that's not an event?
Yes, we have, Putnam County Sheriff's Office is there for every event, what we
Right.
call the 24-hour things. They're there 24/7.
Right.
They're there at the start and to the end. And so the EMS, we are working with them on how to staff it with them right now. Right now, I have a first responder that we have our own cart, and we take care of whatever medical issues there are
So they're there just on event weekends?
on event weekends. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Your first responder? And
He's there every weekend, but.
Every weekend.
Every weekend, but
But-
the event weekends,
But EMS and
the sheriff's office is only there on the event weekends.
Okay. Do you allow any kind of latrines or personal sanitary facilities at all in, okay, good. Are generators allowed in the primitive camping area? Is there a time when, pardon?
I just want to say, I was nodding my head, but yes, ma'am.
All right.
Generators are allowed.
Now, is there a time constraint on those that they can't be used after a certain time of day?
No, ma'am.
So they could run all night if they wanted
Correct.
to?
Mm-hmm.
Is that being a good neighbor?
It is in our campground. I don't understand, I say I don't, here's, what we have there is not a true campground in this.
Right.
It's not where you come and you come to ride. It's normal activity. We are probably the largest mud bog, or I don't even call it a mud bog anymore, campground ATV resort. We're the largest one probably in the southeast right now. And it's just the nature of the business. People come, they're used to going to places where there's nothing. They're just an open field. They open up their property, people open up their property and they come and ride and they do whatever. We probably have more facilities. We have 2 bathhouses. I have more bathhouses than anywhere in Northeast Florida right now. We have 2 large bathhouses. And that's why we have been successful, because when people go to camp, they like to know that they can go take a hot shower and be clean. So that's why
Right.
we've been successful.
You've got all of those amenities on site that people can use.
Correct.
So I'm going to think very seriously about asking that we add to the PUD that generators can only be used, cannot be used from like 11 p.m. until 8 a.m. I know people want to have air conditioners and all of that, but you've also got a lot of noise being generated by that.
We've never had a complaint ever about generators.
Most of your new generators are
I would
quiet.
think that would
Yeah.
be an
Are they?
unreasonable thing to
Yeah,
do myself.
You don't?
I think it would be unreasonable to
Okay.
ask people to not run
Okay.
the generator
Me too.
between,
Okay.
certain
I'm just-
hours. I mean, it's,
Just going through my little list here.
I mean, if
Now,
Yeah.
on your master plan, no, on the maps that we have that were done by, I believe, your environmental people, the wetlands map, you show trails into those jurisdictional wetlands.
Are you on Exhibit G?
Let's see where I am. I have to find it.
I think it's the very last one.
Okay, there's A. Yes, Exhibit D, I believe, or no. Keep going. Okay, got it. You've got a lot, that's, page 30 is your mitigation. Page 29, I think, is, or the one before it.
I think where you're seeing the trails is on Exhibit
F.
F. F.
That's correct.
So if you,
There are a
if
lot
you,
of trails being shown back in those jurisdictional wetlands.
if you look on Exhibit G, and the title of it is Mitigated Wetlands Map, and I can call Ryan Carter up here if I need to, but he and the Water Management District rode the property, and they identified where trails were encroaching into wetlands, and Skeet, they mitigated for them. So now they're permitted impact areas. So
So
that's what you're seeing.
So what was the purpose of Exhibit F?
It shows you where those impacts are.
Okay, so that's where the impacts are that have been mitigated.
Correct. And so if they have not been mitigated and they're not permitted, there are no trails allowed. There's no
Okay.
riding allowed. And
All
this
right.
PUD is very specific about that.
Okay. The last question I have for you all, you've got a lot of land, substantial amount of land. Why are you needing to have riding in the woods that are on the residential side of your property? You've got a lot of land where people can ride around in those 1,000-acre woods. Why can't riding be restricted on your, adjacent to property that is occupied with residential dwellings?
First, and I will let him address this too, but it has a much wider setback. I think is it 325 or 350?
Well, I'm not talking about racing, I'm just talking about riding around out in the woods, anything, using a vehicle close to a boundary that abuts residential property.
I think it has a higher setback, but it also has a berm,
It has a berm.
yes. It's 100, I believe.
It's
I think it was
320.
100 we did last.
It's, for motorcycle riding, it's 325 feet.
Would be, they're the
For all the,
lowest, yeah.
say again?
She's talking about general riding.
I'm talking about general right, any writing, period. What is the need to use that small, basically compared to your overall land, what is the need to use that small area that abuts a residential area?
Right now, the setback, we added the berm, and we set back 75 feet from the property line.
All right, that's good.
Okay.
But my question is, why do you need to have writing in that area that is close to your campground and that abuts that residential area? Why can't that small area be eliminated as writing area?
I guess, how far is enough, what I'm getting at? I mean, we set back 75 feet. What I'm getting at, if you keep, you know.
I'm just
we
asking you up
just-
front.
Right. I think we need it because most of that, all that riding area is on the hill.
Right.
We are trying to discourage folks. That's why we're putting up signage. Part of the agreement now is the signage where people don't ride in the wet areas.
Right.
And so that is the highest property, you know, it's
Right.
where people come riding. It's not the area where they're making the noise. I mean, it's just, they're just riding through there. So I don't know.
I'm just asking that
I
question
think
because that's a small portion of your overall acreage.
But that's part of the appeal of the place, so they do have areas to ride. I mean, it's just a matter of opinion, I
Okay.
guess, and it's yours and mine, and I think it's appropriate there. I think we've set back far enough to,
Okay.
and with the berm and everything to address it.
I have a question, Madam Chairman.
And also, by time, it's limited by time.
It is limited by time. I realize that.
Have we had any complaints about the operation, the way you're conducting it right now,
Yes.
about noise? Okay.
All right, we're going to wrap this up. Any other questions of Skeet or Ms. Whittington? And then we're going to move on to public comments.
I have one question.
Yes, sir.
Your berm that you mentioned on the property on the side where the residents live, how high is that?
12 feet,
12 feet?
sir. It's more than just a little berm, it's 12 feet at least.
Do you still have complaints after a 12-foot berm?
Yes, sir. I think we will always, yes, you always will.
Are they complaining
There are
about
trees
noise?
actually on top of the berm now. The berm's been there for 4 or 5 years now. There are actually trees and bushes growing on the berm. Before it was just earthen. Now we've let it grow, so it's actually doing more and more as it's time. It's got, you know, pretty good trees growing on it now and really big bushes, so it's really substantial now.
And he is required to comply with the noise ordinance, the county's noise ordinance is in this PUD.
Right, the noise ordinance is for amplified sound, I believe.
Right, so there can't be blaring music there.
Yeah, but that doesn't count for the noise of the
The
motorcycles
vehicles.
with no mufflers on them.
Right, that's
Or,
what the mitigation of the berm was for, and the setback, which I thought was 100, but you're saying 75.
75, did you change?
I thought you changed that to 100, and the berm had to be
The,
75. within that
the
100.
setback for riding,
no,
On the
berm.
residential side over there,
it's 100.
That's what I
okay,
thought.
That
it
was
100.
changed to
Well,
100
okay,
from
so-
50.
Yeah.
and just, I
That's
have
inside
to
the
move a
berm.
fence. Other words,
Say again?
there's a 75-foot berm, he's asking for it to go to 100, which
Yes.
I'll increase it 25 foot. I just have to move a fence, another fence.
Okay, and that's inside the berm. That 100 feet is
The
inside the
berm
berm.
is
Inside the
contained
100
within
feet.
the setback.
Pardon?
The
Okay.
berm would be contained within the setback.
Okay,
Yes,
all
ma'am.
right.
So the width of the berm is probably 50 feet if it's a 12-foot high berm with that, have slopes on it.
Likely.
So you're only 25 feet away from the berm, or maybe 50 feet away from the
You're
berm.
roughly around
is
70
like
or 60.
being right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, the berm is on the property line, and it's pretty wide, and then there's a
You say it's
hole.
like 50 feet wide at the base of it?
No, that's
probably?
not, no, sir, it's not that wide. It was pretty stable soil when we put it there, and it doesn't erode because it's on the high hill, so you don't get erosion like you do in low areas and anything.
Okay.
I do have a question. Where do you think the second entrance needs to go?
We've already pulled the permit for the second entrance. It goes on the very east end, at the very east corner. We've already pulled the driveway permit. I just haven't done it yet because I wanted to get through. I didn't want to go build a driveway until
Good idea.
until I had permit, you know, but I pulled the permit several months ago, so the permit's already pulled to replace it because I have to do a improved entrance there.
Okay.
So it is
Are there
quite-
any of those, sorry.
I'm sorry, it is quite a distance from the current entrance.
Yes, it's
How
to the
far?
complete east
Right, I
corner
see
of the
east
property.
boundary, okay.
Are there any of those sliver pieces of property at that entrance that you're going to
No,
be
sir,
taking
no,
out?
sir. There's a big piece of property on the south end of the property that is not part of that Kenilworth subdivision. All that is kind of in the middle.
Okay.
None of those are near the edge.
So what you're calling east is what you would first approach coming from Palatka.
Correct.
The only other thing I know you have a lot of traffic on event weekends and on weekends with people waiting to check in and come through the gate. I would wonder if DRC is going to consider any kind of ingress, egress lanes.
Like center turn lanes on the
Either a
county
center
road?
turn lane or a side turn lane, yes.
We are aware of issues with the level of service on that county road, and the DRC, mainly Public Works, but with planning, would, there's a possibility of requiring a traffic study, or if it's proven in some other way, the traffic study would prove it, that there are issues during events where the level of service drops from a D to either an E or an F, which is below our adopted level of service. So a center left turn lane or some other improvement as determined by Public Works would be required by the Putnam County Comprehensive Plan and the Land Development Code.
Right. So we could require a traffic study.
Yes, ma'am, through the DRC. It's already within the language of the Land Development Code. So the Public Works Department or Planning would require it at the preliminary
At the
stage of
DRC
the
planning
development
stage,
review.
okay. Okay.
Can I say something about that?
Yes, sir?
That's why we needed the second entrance on those large events. That cut out all the,
Okay.
it's when we have only one entrance is then when we would get the traffic. When you have the second entrance, we use the second entrance only when we need it. You understand? It's not
Okay.
it's just when we have large events, when we know on Saturday morning, and then after that, you never need it again.
But that may be
Also,
something-
they have changed their procedures to require, they have to make reservation before they get there. So people aren't just queuing, trying to, don't you
What-
require reservations?
What we do now, we actually sell a limited number of tickets. We got surprised at an event in April where we had traffic. Unbelievable. We were actually turning people away. We had so many people show up. So what we did from then on, when we know we have a big weekend like Thanksgiving's coming up, we only sell so many vehicle passes. People is not our problem. It's vehicles, parking vehicles. So what we do, we only sell a limited number of vehicle passes that we know we can park adequately. After that, the door's closed. You can't get in.
That's only on event weekends.
On the large event weekends, yes, ma'am. There's no other time where the traffic is out there. It's just on those large event weekends when the Thanksgiving, the Super Bowl, and maybe Memorial Day. Other than that, you really don't get anything on the road.
Okay. Okay, at this point, thank you very much. You'll have a chance to come back up for about 5 minutes to respond to any questions that might come up from our one person who has waited very patiently for the last hour and 45 minutes. Cynthia Locke, please come forward. And I've asked Ms. Locke to hold her questions to 10 minutes, hold her comments to 10 minutes.
Okay, I'm I'm Cindy Logg, and I live on Red Fox Road, on Rodman Lane, 109 Rodman Lane. I've been living out there for, good God, forever. We've been living around this PUD ever since it's evolved, and from the beginning, we're still dealing with it. And regarding this gentleman's question about the parcels out there, my understanding back in the day when Mr. Brown was there, there were over 85 parcels out there that the owner did not have complete control over. So I don't know where the 26 comes from. If there's more, we should find out, because in my opinion, they should be fenced off from this PUD so that the vehicle use in the PUD they don't ride on these parcels that are owned by these other parcel owners. Those parcels are of value, apparently, to Mr. Alford. And I think they probably have increased in value. If I owned a lot out there, you could put a generator and sell ice, or you could build a tiny house, or you could do whatever you wanted to on it and make money off your lot from his business, I guess. I guess that would be permissible, I don't know, but to me, the land is valuable to the person who owns it, and it should be fenced off from this parcel, this PUD. And because apparently it's valuable at this point to him. Apparently he doesn't want to pay $10,000 for it, but I would put 30 on mine just to aggravate him. But anyhow, besides that, in regards to the setback buffers, what I'm asking this commission board to reconsider rezoning to PUD 500 feet on that west side. I think you brought that up, Ms. Roberts. So we can have a buffer on the west side. And that buffer would be for the surrounding properties, and that would meet the 500-foot minimum setback for the Putnam County Land Development Code for a motorsports park, Section 45193 of the Putnam County Land Development Code for Section C, for standards and conditions related to use vehicles for riding and racing near surrounding properties. So applying a 500-foot setback on the west side would give us that buffer from anyone riding on that side. It would even act like a little wildlife corridor between his parcels where he's riding and the west side where the residents are, going up into the conservation easement that is north. That's now taken away because you've got the RPM alley and all that area they're riding at, that's where there's wetland impacts now from the uses and conditions that are allowed out there. So anyhow, we are also asking that you apply a 200-foot setback on the west side boundaries facing County Road 310 from the distance to the entrance to ensure future land use for property south across the street from Mr. Alford. There's huge parcels of land there across the street. And their agricultural residential use could have future growth. Maybe they might want to build houses on that parcels or whatever, but with this business and how it is, you'll be able to ride down County Road 310 and see this camping area he's got proposed in this PUD on that west side. So if the buffer was 200 feet in, 5 foot over, the people on the south of this PUD could develop and they could have future growth, which I think is important for Putnam County. And it would also, let me get back up here, it would also give a buffer and deter smoke from campfires, which is an issue out there. There's a lot of campfires. The smoke emits up into the air and it goes out onto County Road 310. I've gone through it several times. I have to call the Sheriff's Department, and he's starting to notice, I guess, as well, because they put signs out. So that 200-foot buffer would let the smoke kind of buffer the trees, and that 500-foot setback would give us a break from noise, from the odors of those generators that do run all night long during the 4-day event. They smell. You can smell it when you go by if you're out there. And that is a issue, that's a safety issue. Okay, the dB levels out there can be 115 dB at 115. So we're asking you to reconsider the noise from these ATVs for the dB levels. I mean, why does anybody need to ride a loud vehicle that can emit noise at 115 dB? So I don't even think that meets OSHA standards for a working environment. And you've got thousands of them out there during these large events. And of course, right now the hours can extend 24. So you've got that noise 24 hours. So if we had the 500-foot buffer or more and that 200-foot, and then if you lowered the dB levels out there, this would help with noise, which emits. It can be heard all the way over on County Road 3. What's the road going to Interlochen?
315.
315. The noise can be heard all the way to there. So I don't think that's an unusual request to change the dB levels. In Section 4522 of the Putnam County Land Development Code, the uses within a PUD are supposed to be compatible with the terrain and the existing uses and properties of the PUD and suitable for use in a manner without hazards to persons, either on or off the site, and erosions or other dangers. Riding ATVs is dangerous, and allowing the extended hours during events should be reconsidered to protect the general public health, safety, and welfare. The PUD's external compatibility was to be based on the adjacent existing properties and the proposed uses and the design development to avoid undue noise, odors, traffic, and other nuisances and dangers to the abutting property and the general public. This PUD currently has wetland impacts due to non-compliance issues from the owner and the PUD ordinance for mud bogging. We wouldn't be here if he didn't have these issues that water management recognized and the county didn't, that I had to turn into the state. The county knew all about this. They just were looking another way. The compatibility factors for PUD planning, in my opinion, do not apply to this PUD's plan with the allowed hours extended for use vehicles, for riding during events near surrounding properties, the dB levels, and the 25-foot setback near wetlands, and the conditions and uses should be considered a nuisance for the environment and the surrounding properties included in the parcels fenced within the PUD. The owner has no control. In my opinion, no one should be riding here at all. The site should close for riding and visitors at a reasonable hour during events. The setbacks in any riding 25 feet from wetlands should be reconsidered. The area surrounding the PUD that existed prior to Hogwaller is zoned residential commercial and abuts conservation land. So if it was supposed to fit into our existing landscape, that's what it was: residential, agricultural, and conservation land. It doesn't fit, but it's here. But we've got to make it better. That's all I'm trying to ask. And these 500-foot buffers on that west side would help. And the 200-foot setbacks from the property line facing County Road 310, lowering those dB levels, and not extending those hours for riding 24 hours at these events, these large events.
You're just about to reach your 10 minutes.
Okay, to encourage compatibility and cooperative relationships between adjoining land uses and surrounding neighbors for their future use is key moving forward. Please consider the property owners who were here first prior to this PUD. The changes requested do not hinder the owner's business model. He can still make money, believe me, and encourages compatibility for Putnam's future growth. And in my opinion, creates an atmosphere and image more suitable for public use in regards to safety, health, and welfare. Striving to truly become Putnam, the eco-family friendly outdoor county, is paramount, in my opinion, for Putnam's growth. And I thank you for your time. I know this is a huge issue. I hope y'all consider the residents and the surrounding properties owners' growth, future growth. We should not have to grow around what he's doing. But if we have to, it is what it is. That's all I can do. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for coming forward. We appreciate your being here. And Mr. Locke, we appreciate your being here as well. I think some of the questions have already been answered and are already being handled. I think the wetlands mitigation is a huge piece that is under the auspices now of the St. John's Water Management District. And I think the Planning and Development Services are also a lot more attentive to these issues that are going on and the questions out there. I think some of the things that are noisome and a nuisance are just going to be part of being in the area of this kind of activity. But at the same time, there may be ways to minimize the impacts and maximize the use of property. And that, I think, is something we need to be looking at. Ms. Whittington, Mr. Alford, excuse me, would you like to come back up, and we'll give you about 5 minutes to answer or respond to any of the concerns that have been raised?
Where to begin?
So the things that first is the parcels that have been, the little slivers that are in there. I think we've pretty much beat that to death. And again, I think one of you mentioned, if there was a problem between one of those slivers and this PUD, that would be a civil matter. And so that's how that would be dealt with. Ms. Locke mentioned 25 feet, I think. The setbacks to the wetlands have been increased, so, and also the impacts have been mitigated and permitted.
Right.
Then I think the main other concern was, well, one thing was compatibility of this project and the terrain and the area. That the county, Putnam County already determined that this is compatible with the comp plan and the area. That's already done. It's stated directly in the PUD, and he now has the use allowed as a vested right to have that. So I don't think that really is an issue. The smoke, I think what was remaining was smoke and noise.
I don't believe we have an ordinance that deals with non-amplified sound, do we?
Non-amplified?
Right. The sound ordinance in Putnam County is amplified sound, I believe.
Correct. So there's a provision in the motorsports facility
Right.
Regulations, which this is not considered a motorsports facility per se, not as it's regulated in the code. There are some regulations that are applied to this from that section, but then there's also the amplified sound ordinance.
Okay.
I don't know of any other regulation
Okay.
on sound.
Skeet told me something when I first got involved in this. I had never been to this park, and he said that he has a decibel meter, and he has used it. He has recorded it. It is the crickets at the property lines are louder. I'll let you give that testimony.
I've been doing studies. I call them my sound studies, and they're my studies. I'm not a scientist. But I've been going over to Rodman Lane. I go over there by Miss Locke's house on Rodman Lane, and I do during the events. And I have probably about 20 on my phone where I go over there at 9:30, 10 o'clock, whatever time when I leave, generally at night. And there are some nights that you can hear hogwaller. I'm not going to deny that. There are some nights you can hear it. But the level is still in the 40 to 50 decibel level. You know, saying over there, it's just, and when I shut my door, you can hear it. I mean, you can't hear it, what I'm saying, when I shut my door. But then if you get outside, but the crickets, I think the crickets are almost as loud as the noise coming from hogwaller. Now, are there times when yes, there are times when we do go over that. I don't doubt that. but it has to be like a consistent, condition where the wind's blowing, you know, way hard and anything. Other than that, it's pretty, I've been doing this for the last 6 months, because I knew this was coming up, just to check myself.
Now, are you using a decibel meter?
I'm using a handheld decibel meter. You can buy them in stores. They go in the little microphone on the end, and you hold them, and I have a picture of it if you wanted to see it, but you don't, it's a registered decibel meter. It's not one on your phone.
It's not a phone
It's
app.
a real live decibel meter. So, and I mean, so yes, I've been checking it out, and there hasn't been a night where I haven't, you know, and I just generally do it on the weekends, because we're not there during the week. We close it. We actually close our trails. We could stay open till 8. We close our trails at 7. Okay, we shut voluntarily. We've been shutting our trails. Actually, now during the winter, we close our trails at 5:30.
Because of daylight?
Because of daylight. I don't want to be trying to go sit somebody in the dark out there, you know, trying to get them out in case they forget. Some people lose track of time, and I have to go out there every now and then and say, hey, guys, we're closed.
So do you have riding, ATV, UTV, motorcycle riding, 24/7? Or is it all shut down at 8 p.m.?
In the
To-
events.
On what we call the event, which is the 24, you know, we're allowed 24. We've never done 24. The most we did this year, we only did 18. You know what I'm saying? But we're allowed 24, but we've never used all of them.
So to answer her question, during the events only, it's
24.
24 hours, and that's from Friday at 8 p.m. until
Till Saturday
Sunday
at 8 p.m., right.
During the other days, it's 8 p.m., and he's stopping it earlier voluntarily. He just told you he's coming down to 7, and now.
Now we're going
5:30.
down to 5:30, just because it gets dark, and I don't want people out there after dark. So I think we've done things, we are slowly, and we are transitioning from more of a, to be honest with you, if you look at our name now, we're called Hogwaller Campground and ATV Resort. We're a fancy resort now, so. Okay. But what we're trying to get away from the
Mud
mud
and a
bog.
fancy resort,
Yeah.
okay.
We're trying to get away from the mud bogging stuff. We only do 5 events now each year that actually have trucks, only 5
They go in the pit.
that go in the pit. We've moved away from that. When we very first started, it was 24. We did it twice a month. We slowly got that part out. Now we're an ATV park, and that's where we're at, so.
And campground.
Okay.
And campground. And we're trying to move to the campground model. Business-wise, we're moving to the campground model more, and with the ATV riding, and so
Right.
we are trying
I'm
to do
going to
that.
ask a tough question.
Certainly.
Being that we have that motorsports ordinance for setback, and that you do operate motor vehicles inside your park, could you handle, and would you handle, or would it cause your business to shut down if you had to handle a 500-foot buffer along residential boundaries?
It wouldn't shut us down, per
Good.
se, but I also think it's unreasonable. I could go for something less. If we have to increase it more,
We already increased it to
we
100, but
Well,
increased it.
500 feet is 1/10 of a mile, basically. Little more than 1/10 of a mile.
But you're
But how
taking-
long? How
But,
long would you,
I
how
would
long
do-
is that western side?
How long is the western border with residential?
It's only probably about a quarter of a mile, probably about 1,300 feet.
Okay.
1,320 feet.
How many houses
How
are
many
there?
houses? 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, there are 4 houses.
4 houses, and I don't get any complaints for those that live on the property line, don't complain. You know, to us.
Irregardless,
All right.
which is not a word, really.
Regardless is a word.
Yeah, it is a word, yeah.
If you did 500 feet times 1,320 feet, that comes out to 15 acres. That's a chunk of land.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, that is a chunk of land.
That is a chunk of land.
it's a big move with the fence, too.
it's
About 15 acres.
I'm willing to negotiate with, 500 feet, and
Would you settle for
I'm
200?
gonna go, and I'm gonna be honest with you. Miss Catherine has told me not to say this, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Okay.
He's a good client. He's fixing to put his big foot in his mouth, isn't
I
he?
am, and,
let
but
me
she's,
ask you-
and,
okay, go ahead.
and
Let him finish.
Go ahead.
here's what I'm gonna tell you. Whether it's 100 feet or 500 feet, if I thought it would make a huge difference, I would be all for the 500 feet. But I don't think, be honest with you, it's just a feel-good thing, because it's not going to change the price of tea in China.
Okay,
Is the
perception
door-
is
and-
reality.
One other suggestion.
Yes, sir.
Could you consider reduction of the decibel limit to 100?
Yes, and be honest with you, here's what we're going to implement in our park on our own. And I really don't want it in the PUD just because of enforcement issues is the hard part. We are going to require anybody after 8 o'clock not to go have a machine over 80 decibels within 10 feet.
10 feet.
Because, and be honest with you, we're trying to go to a campground model, and we think that's something that we are going to implement on our own. We are in the process of doing it. We've been doing the study. I've been going around measuring with my decibel meters, machines, and seeing what is too loud and too loud, because sound carries, when it's raining, I don't know if y'all understand how sound works. When it's really damp, sound goes a long way. When it's dry air, sound doesn't go very far. Or if the wind, all it takes is a 2-mile-an-hour wind, and you wouldn't hear anything on the other side of a field, what I'm saying. So there's a lot of environmental factors, but we are talking about reducing at night nobody can have a machine over 80 decibels after 8 p.m.
All right, would you compromise here? From sundown to sunup, would you restrict riding in those areas in a 500-foot buffer area, only from sundown to sunup?
Here's the issue. I would have to fence it, so,
Couldn't do
because
it.
people can, you're talking 1,000 acres, people are riding.
So 15 or 7 acres or 15 acres, if we compromised and went down to 250 feet, out of 1,000 acres, 1,100 acres, that's a small portion.
But you're taking away the high ground. You're forcing people, we're trying to force them out of the
Right.
the wetter areas. That is the high side. And
A lot more high ground on that area other than that 250 feet or whatever along there.
Yes, but you're reducing their riding area that they can ride other than we are
Trying to help you be a good neighbor here, Skeet.
I am trying, and
And you're already at
and we're
100.
yes,
You're already at 100.
I'm at 100 now. So we're
Can you go
we're-
with her suggestion? of
We didn't create this problem, they did in 2007.
Is the
Your Board of
berm,
County
is the
Commissioners
berm over there
created
where
the
you're
problem.
talking about?
yes, the berm is up
You've-
all the way on the residential already.
So you've already got a berm
With
Berm.
trees on top of it.
with trees on top of it?
Yes,
And you're giving them 100 feet
Yeah.
right.
buffer?
Well, the berm is within the 100 feet, so.
Doesn't really make much
Doesn't matter.
difference.
Don't matter.
They're not right.
Berm's a berm.
And
Right.
it's fenced off. They don't ride over
I
there.
mean,
It's
I don't
fenced
know
off.
how many people you know that ride these little 4x4s, or they call them side-by-sides. What?
Right.
Different one.
Okay.
A UTV there.
My granddaughter, which is 11, gonna be 12, we have 3 or 4 of them, and she rides every one of them because she claims every one.
Of course, she's a granddaughter.
I mean, you've got, if you build the Berlin Wall, and then you grow some trees on top of it, and you give them a 100-foot buffer, I can't see any purpose of doing anything more than that.
Just a minute. You've got to be on record, Mrs. Locke, and I can't let you come back up, I'm sorry. We hear you. He's been on his side of he's been on his side of the line. And
On Rodman,
he's been on Rodman Lane, and he's been on, I'm sorry, you're going to have to be on the record, and I'm not going to let you come back up and speak.
but on top of the berm and the plantings on the berm and the 100 feet, which is an increase, it was 75, his proffer of the decibel limitation after 8 o'clock, that is a compromise.
Right, after 11 o'clock,
8.
after 8 PM.
That's 40 days a year, as opposed to the 24 events?
The 20, yeah,
Yes.
and that's the only time it applies is on the, actually only,
When there's no event,
huh?
when there's no events.
Yeah, when
It's
there's.
every day at
When
Yeah,
there's
so
no,
I'll lose all that property all the rest of the days of the year when there's nothing, when I don't use it. So that's why I kind of hesitate to put a fence over 500 feet, because then I would lose use of
Okay.
that property.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Back last time, and I was very new on the board when you came last time, there was a restriction at that time, and I thought it was 250 feet, and you asked for that to be reduced. Was that the area that wasn't there some kind of
That was the same
thing that
area.
you said, you know, I would like to, you know, you asked if there was anything else we could do, and he said, well, I would like to reduce this restriction from this to this. What was it before?
No, it's never,
It
it wasn't
was-
that area. We made the 75. We did the 75. The 320,
I thought it
I
was
think
250
I
and
think
we
we
went down
increased
to.
the
It was proposed
250
to be
for
250.
racing to 325. Actually, I went the other way.
Yeah, on the racing deal.
The
was
racing
changed.
deal used to be 250, I believe.
Yeah, the racing deal, you
Might have been-
increased it
You might have been
yourself.
right. It
Yeah,
might have
we
been just
increased
for
But
it.
the racing deal.
The racing used to be 250, and we increased it to 325, I think.
And I think
Yeah.
we compromised, though, to go down to the 100 feet. Thank you, Mr. Hafner. We compromised to go down to the 100 feet because I think it may have been proposed in the original proposal to be 200 feet, or it was discussed at being 250 feet. But, okay,
You got a 12-foot berm, and how high you think your vegetation is on the very top of the berm with the trees? 6-foot trees now, 5, 6?
They're at least 7 or 8 feet tall, or growing.
And they're gonna
You know,
grow
they're
bigger.
growing. They're big bushes.
okay.
I have a question. On this, I'm looking at the master plan on the very west side. It is, by my measurement with my sticky note, it looks about 700 feet of that west side is now campground. Was that previously used for riding?
It's future campground,
Right.
correct.
Is it
But
currently
is-
being
was
used
it-
for riding?
That's been used for riding now.
So that won't be used for riding anymore if it's a campground. I mean, I know people may ride from.
Well, it's just woods now.
Vehicle,
That's
too.
for future campground. If we cleared it, it's not to say I couldn't.
That's not where I saw those blue barrels, like turned over.
No, the blue barrels are in the camping area.
Those three- Okay.
They're not in this area. If you look, that goes all the way to the property line. That
Okay.
hatched area, it stops on
That
the,
is not,
He's on sheet number 4. Is that
Right.
the sheet you're on? Bottom
well, I'm
right?
on the main one, but yeah, it's,
And sheet number 1 you're on?
so those things are not, that's not where the blue barrels are in that
no,
area
ma'am.
now?
No,
It's all
ma'am.
wooded right now?
No,
Okay.
ma'am. It's still about from where those blue barrels were to the property lines, probably, you know, I don't know, 1,000 feet, you know what I'm
Okay.
saying?
Right,
Yeah.
so if that is no longer gonna be, if this is approved as campsites, that area will not be used as
As riding, correct.
riding anymore. And that's about 750 feet
But
deep.
be honest with you, that's way off in the future.
Right.
We have a lot of campsites to fill between now and then.
Right.
Would you be amenable to thinking about having a centralized or maybe 2 centralized community fire pits, rather than each campsite having an individual fire? Because I know not that many people cook over fire now,
Oh, well.
not over open flame fire.
Well, but they have campfires, and what happens, we have groups that get an area, and this is families camping. This is, if you come and look at the average age of our people coming out there, these aren't young kids, these are people in expensive motorhomes, they're families, they're with little kids, and they make an area, and then they put a campfire, and it's usually 3 or 4 families together, and they build a campfire.
They make s'mores.
And that's why we've been so successful, to be honest with you. We're the most family-oriented,
Right.
one of these parks ever, you know, that's why we're,
But is there any way
coming
you
from
could put
everywhere.
some centralized fire pits amidst your camping areas to discourage these individual campfires.
I don't,
I don't believe that would work.
I don't think it works because people,
Yeah, I wouldn't think.
how would you,
Okay.
because the way,
Okay.
the way the campground's laid out, I don't see how.
Okay, I'm
'cause
just
not
trying to
everybody's
address
gonna-
some
I
questions.
understand, but I don't think it's, to be honest with you, I don't,
Camping is
the smoking.
campfire.
Madam
just-
Chairperson, may I say, oh,
I spent 10 summers doing it.
What if they have a fire in?
Well, yeah, every residential subdivision could each have a fire pit in their
Right,
backyard.
that's true. What are there fires just on the ground, or do they?
Some of them are on the ground.
Metal.
Most of them bring these things that you put, these portable pits. That's what everybody does now. They bring, they make them or they buy them. You can buy at Home Depot or Lowe's. You see them.
Yep.
That's what,
Yep.
half of them are those and some of them are on the ground, both ways.
Okay. All right.
Well, they haven't burnt the place down, so they must be doing
We
it
haven't
right.
had any fire.
Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to bring it back to the board now. Thank you all. I think we understand what, we're piecing together some of the things.
I'm scared to leave
So
the side.
let's bring it back to the board for discussion.
Madam Chairperson,
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay, let's see what.
I don't think everybody here on this board has been out there to see this thing in action. From the time it started till now, I mean, it's been out there for years,
2008, I believe, wasn't it?
2007.
a good period of time.
Started in 7, but it was approved in 8.
My son and his friends and my grandkids come up here from South Florida just to participate on their property. It's known as the Rolls Royce of ATVs, trucking, mud bogging. They've done as good a job as I've seen anywhere, and I've watched my kids grow through this. And I'm 80 years old, my kids are 50, and their kids are 30, and I got grandkids coming up with the same thing, ATVs and motorcycles. Noise is noise. They've done everything we have asked them. I remember this going back 5 and 6 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
Put the berm in, put the trees on it, make it 100 feet, make it 300 feet, change it from here to here. They've been accommodating everything we've ever asked. There's one thing we can never control, that's sound and smoke.
Or
When the
wind.
forests start to burn, my eyes burn. I have allergies. And I'm not anywhere near a forest fire. But camping as they have it out there, which is what draws the people. You want to make a little campfire at night, your family gets around, you cook hot dogs, you do hamburgers, everybody has their own campsite. You don't want to share your food with everybody who comes. But in my opinion, they've done the most exceptional job that I have ever seen done with this type of an operation. And we're trying to change it to make it something that's going to fit in the middle of a city. It's not in the middle of a city. And what they've done, I think, they've done more than try to accommodate everything we've asked for. Berms, trees, change dimensions. I'm ready to vote on it now, because I've got to leave too pretty soon. I know Jerry has got to leave, and he was shaking his head like I am. Please, let's move on and let's get this thing resolved tonight.
I would entertain a motion.
I move that we adopt, as amended, those proposals on item
All right.
PUD 20-006.
Okay, there were some things that we have that were entered as amendments that aren't in the original PUD that Mr. Fuentes presented. One was adding that motorcycle racing is limited to 2 events per year.
Yeah, as amended as they presented
Right,
with the
okay,
amendments.
but we got to get these in there.
Oh, okay.
That a driveway apron be provided that would prevent all of the.
School bus.
Right,
That's a DOT requirement.
yes. Now, somebody had said 100-foot setback on riding on perimeter. That wasn't me.
It's already in there.
It's already in there.
No,
And-
what y'all feel like need to be changed, and it probably does, is those interior pieces of property should not apply to the 100-foot setback.
Right. And I don't think it does now, does it?
I think it does, 'cause it says property.
So interior parcels would be excluded from the setbacks.
That's more of application than putting it in the ordinance. I don't recommend putting that in the ordinance because then we're treating some property different than other property.
Okay,
The way the ordinance reads, it should apply to those.
okay.
But what I don't recommend from a purely, I guess, equal application of the ordinance standpoint is somehow discounting those parcels in the writing of the ordinance. I don't really see any other option other than to enforce it
Can I make a
against
suggestion?
those lots.
Okay.
Because they're the same private property that's around the bounds of it.
Right.
And so putting it in as, it would be diminishing the value of that private property in a way that probably should not be in the ordinance, in my opinion, but the
So what do
commission.
you recommend we do with what's already in there that implies?
My recommendation would be to leave the language as it stands.
Gabriel, page 11 of the 22, which is the red line. Number 6, the new 16. The
Yes,
entire property shall be fenced to prohibit unauthorized vehicle and foot access, with the exception of the entrance and exit. The boundary fence. It doesn't say anything about your slivers, and that's your ordinance that you're referring to. So,
But
I
the
don't-
slivers are a boundary, because he doesn't own
Correct.
Right.
it. So that is a boundary.
Could we just insert the word exterior boundaries?
My recommendation stands the same. I would not treat.
Leave it alone?
Yes, ma'am.
What I would like to see is that those boundaries of those slivers, if they're not in a wetland, that they get fenced in. Because I feel like our job is to protect the people that, I'm fine if we reduce the 100 feet myself, but if I'll go along with Mr. Quintus on that. But I would like to see that those boundaries, because they are not part of his PUD, but they're using it like it's part of his PUD, that they get fenced in. Now, if they're in the wetland, they're not gonna be used anyway. They're gonna be away from the wetland. So, and it sounds like to me from what he's saying, most of them are in the wetland, so it's only a few.
as soon as you do that, talked about taxes, as soon as you put a fence around
You're
it,
gonna have to tax it.
they will be taxed. I can guarantee you that. And those people that aren't paying nothing
Well, then they
Are
might
not-
be willing to
are
sell.
not gonna be very happy with what we did to them.
No.
Because we're mandating the fence, and I don't think we should be mandating a fence there. I don't mind the fence around the entire perimeter to keep unwanted people off. Now, the slivers have access, every access that's imaginable, and I guarantee you, they haven't been on their property. Maybe the guy that's in where the campground is, he may come over to participate and watch. But the ones out in the middle of the boondocks, where you gotta have a hunting dog to find it, you put a fence on it, now they're gonna be now they're gonna be taxed.
Yep.
And I wholeheartedly disagree with Gabriel with all due respect, but I don't want you to create a tax on my property for some stupid reason.
Madam Chair, if I may address that point, I'm not sure how placing a fence on Mr. Alford's property would create a tax on other property.
You're putting the fence around the property line.
But it's on Mr.
I'm not,
But it's
I've never
Mr.
heard
Alford's
that.
property line that's being
Alfred's
fenced in.
property. It's not it's not the other
But
people's property.
regardless, the fence issue, in my opinion, again, could be problematic because now, where is the opening for the fence? How do we allow people to access the interior of those parcels? So,
Yeah, that is an issue.
I think we should leave the fence on the perimeter and be done. Any interior pieces, leave it go. It says we don't have the mud bog fence. When I was out there last week, it was fenced. Very well fenced, as a matter of fact.
I didn't mention that the fence was not there. I said that we removed the requirement for the
Fence.
fence. So
Okay, well-
I'm not sure if the fence is, it's been 6 months since I've been out there,
Well,
so.
I
You
was,
still have the pits fenced in, because you have campground camping up to, the butts up to the fence. Okay. Okay, you're not on the record, so we can't do that. All right. So we've got two separate pieces of opinion here. Mr. Danzler feels that the slivers are not, if they're not in a wetland, if they're upland, they should be fenced in. Or fenced out, I guess is the better way of putting it. And Mr. Schwing, and I think Mr. DeSantis disagree with that.
Well, why would we want to, why would we want to
Wait.
fence somebody out?
I will say that I disagree with Joel on that too, sorry, Joel, because
Everybody's got opinion.
it could become a hazard to people on four-wheelers, number one. Number two, if those people want to fence their property off, they can come and do just like the other man did. But most people probably don't live anywhere near it, haven't seen that property. I think it's kind of a moot point to me on fencing it.
Joey?
It's mute. Don't fence it, just let it ride, because
Let it ride.
it's just, it's plotted out there and it's not really a subdivision.
Yeah, it's platted, but it's not
Then you have
actuality.
to, like Gabriel said, you have to put gates on so they can have access to their,
There might be
I
people out
guess.
there that
I
don't
don't
even know they own it because people have died and their kids got it and they don't even know.
I
I've seen that happen before.
I owned a piece of property for several years. Nobody could tell me where it was located. Some finally found it. Okay. Do we want to add to the PUD that motorcycle racing is limited to 2 events per year? Do I have consensus on that? If not, raise your hand.
Well, the applicant.
If not, raise your hand. The applicant wants that. Are you all okay with that?
it's on the master plan.
It's
but
on the
I think
master
it-
plan, but it's not in the language.
But the ordinance controls is what.
Right, the
it
ordinance
says.
is what controls everything.
I think it needs to be in the ordinance.
Right.
Yes.
All right.
Definitely.
Do we want to add that the driveway apron will be the driveway aprons will be improved, period? I'm having a shaking head up here.
No,
Land development may require more than just
they're
improving
gonna,
aprons.
DOT's gonna require
Right,
more than
DOT
the
is going to have to
driveway.
say so, but that, but we can put the minimum in the PUD?
Yes, Madam Chair. DOT, so this is a county right-of-way, so Public Works would have jurisdiction.
Okay.
But that being said, if you will, please clarify what kind of improvement
The
you would
apron shall
require.
be paved,
Paved? Okay.
paved apron
Or concrete.
on both,
But Skeet might
Both
not have to pay
entrances?
for it.
We're talking to where the bus turns.
that and where his other entrance is going to be.
But Skeet might have to pay for that, DOT might pay for that, or the school board
possible.
might have to pay for that because it's
It's not
their.
DOT, it's county.
No,
It's
that's not
county
true.
public works.
Anytime you come off a paved road, you have to have an apron, whether it's county or DOT.
So
There is an apron, but it needs to be bigger.
I think there's just a straight shot in. It's paved, it doesn't have any flanges on it. But are we okay with those two things being added to the PUD?
Yes.
Were there any other things that we as a board want to add to the PUD?
The only thing I would like to see added is more footage on the residential side. I know y'all feel like it's 100 feet.
It's not much, it's from here to there,
I
here
never
to the
heard
back
what
wall.
the decibels of crickets are, but I know if I was a resident, I would not want to hear that all the time, especially if I lived there and then somebody moved in on me like that. I wouldn't want to hear it.
What's
You
your
know,
suggestion?
well, I mean, if what the
Motorsports,
comp plan said that a motorsports would be 500 feet, it should be 500 feet if that's what the comp plan said.
even though this is not classified as a motorsports facility, it
Land
is
development, okay.
quasi-motorsports facility. It's a hybrid. Has
So
the
what
same
would be a
flavor.
motorsports, like a racetrack?
Yeah, motocross racing or something like that.
Sort of what we
Well, that is
turned
motocross.
down in south end of the county.
No, what we turned down up behind Seminole Power Plant.
That, the south end of the county was turned down too,
Yes.
in Pomona Park.
Oh, that was a long time ago, yeah.
It still was turned down.
It
Yeah.
cost,
Same thing.
Yeah.
Motorsports Park.
Yep. So, 500 feet. Joey,
No,
what would you go with?
what he's got now.
Aaron?
You've got a 12-foot berm with trees on it. You can't get no higher.
Okay.
If not, you're gonna have to build a border like they did in Mexico, but
That wouldn't even top it. Aaron, what are you thinking?
I think 500 is probably a little excessive, but I really don't know, to be honest. I mean, I think 100 with the berm is probably, the noise is not going to be much different if you make it 400 more feet, in my opinion, but I don't really know a whole lot about that.
Okay,
100.
As it is, 100.
I'm with Joel, but I'm a minority. Okay. So we're basically going to leave it as written with the exception of adding motorcycle racing is limited to 2 events per year, and driveway aprons will be required on both entrances.
Correct.
Paved driveway entrances.
The amendments that the applicant handed
And-
reduce it.
The reduction from 168 to 56, was it?
Right, right,
The
those,
amendments that
yes.
were brought in by the petitioner.
Right, and the changes, and we've got to list those. So reducing down to, let me get my fingers working here.
Madam Chair, if I may interrupt for just a moment. Ms. Fortner had brought up a third item, and I just want to seek clarification. There was a portion of this that she mentioned, streets and roads leading to the camping area, that it conflicts with G below. To clarify that, the way that would be read is, in this PUD, the streets and roads would not be required to be paved, but if the commission desires that all the roads be paved, or simply leave it as it is, I'd just like clarification on that.
Yeah, don't be crazy, baby.
Madam Chair, I would say,
Just a minute, we got Aaron thinking.
Yeah, no, I just thought that those conflicted with each other, those, I'm looking at the section now, trying to find it, on page 12, that B and G conflicted, because I think the Land Development Code would probably call for paving in the, or, I know in other RV areas that we have approved, they had to have paved
They do.
area.
So that's the standard for all recreational vehicle parks.
So,
And that would be included here.
That would be because of the addition of constructing them in accordance. Now, the way that I would read that is that any new ones would be required to have paved roads, or anything that the ordinance requires, not the existing that's currently in place. But if you wish to clarify that, perhaps in B, you can,
I mean, we can't make a change that would go against the Land Development Code.
well, so a PUD does allow
conflict.
some flexibility in that. Insofar as it produces a unique development, or a development standard needs to be somewhat modified, such as a setback. But given that it's been in this PUD, perhaps in G, we can include that, give me just a moment here. Perhaps we can write some language in there, except as otherwise stated within this PUD ordinance in G, so that
Okay.
the streets and roads would continue not to be paved, need to be paved. But as this expands, it is staff's opinion that there's going to have to be some stabilization of those roads and constant usage of those roads. There's a reason why RV parks are required to have paved roads, and it's because of the intensive use of those roads leading to the campsites. So, from staff's perspective, as this expands, it would benefit the public welfare and the orderly development of that RV park to maintain all of the requirements for anything additional that's developed.
So are you saying adding something to the agreement?
For B, to clarify that, because I do agree it is a little bit confusing, to clarify, perhaps the commission can add that the streets/roads leading to the camping area and within the camping area are not required to be paved for existing development or for the existing portion of the RV park.
Okay.
Okay.
So what you're saying, where he said he was gonna be the future campground out in the middle of nowhere, you wanna put a paved road up to there and not where it's at, where we got dirt roads now?
They're required for any campground, regardless of where they are. So that's the current requirement, and all campgrounds have to go in PUDs right now, under the LDC, so.
Could we put a time-specific requirement in here that within 2 years of the final adoption of this agreement, all roads in the campground must be paved?
That would be, I wouldn't recommend that the existing go to paved, just because they've been permitted to be unpaved, and so
Pete, please sit down.
anything additional over that would be subject to that.
Okay. Okay, anything beyond,
So the dirt roads that we have now are fine, but as future development, like he says, in 10 years, you gotta put some kind of pavement to get up to that.
I don't know what the state of the roads are out there right now, but they may be fine. But what I'm saying is that as you increase intensity of use at the RV park, it may start causing issues with those accesses.
I know that the roads have been lime-rocked and are graded and maintained, so I think as long as they're kept useful and not rutted and mud boggy in the road areas,
The roads were freshly graded when I was out
Yeah.
there, yeah.
the roads are kept that well. The only thing not graded was that apron that caught my eye. But, so anything new would require to be paved.
If, with that clarification, yes, Madam Chair,
Okay.
inserting that clarification.
All right. Nancy, are you getting all of this? Are you getting these amendments that we're looking at? Okay.
I believe you are too, Nancy.
Between you and Gabriel, I think we have to list the amendments in the motion.
So there are 2 amendments listed currently.
The motorcycles and the driveway apron. Okay.
So, I mean, I'm fine with leaving the language like it is, as long as, I mean, it still has to go to development review, right?
Yes, ma'am, as long as the intent is understood that additional camping areas would be developed according to those standards,
Yeah,
expansion of that camping area.
which is what it says now, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
And we've got the 3 that Catherine added.
What's that?
We've got the 3 amendments that Catherine asked to be added.
Yep.
All right. You know what all of those are, so we can say as amended.
As amended.
All right, do I hear a motion to that effect?
So
You
moved.
got one on the floor.
I already made it.
Oh, we already got it, I'm
As
sorry.
amended. Yes.
You already got a motion on the floor.
And we accept it as amended.
As a correction, Madam Chair, I'm sorry, there are 5 that Ms. Catherine added, so
All right,
are all 5 part of this motion?
are they? You all made the motion, tell me.
I thought we said what, the other part was whatever she presented to us with her
Yeah,
changes.
the way I made the motion was as amended, as presented also by the petitioner. She made
Okay,
it
so as amended.
as amended.
All right,
I'll second it.
Thank you.
okay. We had a motion, but we didn't have a second. That's what we didn't have.
Okay.
Got me confused there, Tom.
No, I don't mean to do that.
You got Tom and Joey this time, not Tom and Jerry.
I'm a Jerry left.
Folks, all those in favor of the motion as it stands to approve the PUD as amended, please signify by saying aye.
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 Chair votes aye. Opposed?
No.
Mr. Danzler's opposed. So we have 5-1 on this one. Folks, it's been a long day. I know we all didn't get everything we wanted, but your forbearance and your time and your interest in all of this is greatly appreciated. You're exercising your civil rights and your civil responsibilities. And while we can't do everything for everybody, we're going to stick with this for right now. But we all know that this is a PUD that never ends.
Madam Chairperson, may I ask a question
Yes.
to the chair? When the gentleman, David Smith, was here, he gave his address as 110 Bass Road, Georgetown. And on all his petitions, he is a Jacksonville resident. I just want to verify, does he live in Georgetown or does he live in
Maybe-
Jacksonville?
Maybe he has a second home in
He
Georgia.
probably has a second home.
That was signed was Jacksonville.
I'm not
Gabriel,
s-
can you speak to that?
I'm not certain what the answer to that
Can you
is.
find out? Let me know, please.
We can, Nancy, can you read out what
What he said?
the mailing address is 130 Fifth Avenue North, Unit 201, Jacksonville Beach.
Correct.
The 911
where his-
address is the subject, or the subject property's address, so it's possible he moved. I'm not
Well, I
sure.
mean, just gave it.
That might be his office.
303
I have a feeling that's his current office and he wants to move
110
it.
Bass Road, Georgetown.
sounds like.
Just verification.
Okay.
That's where he goes to fish.
Could be.
I have a feeling that the Jacksonville address is probably where his current office is and he's looking to move it to Georgetown.
Yeah.
Sounds like that's what it is. We still have to approve the minutes of the October meeting. Thank you, Mr. Perry, for reminding me of that. It's been a long night, long evening.
I so
move we
move on
approved it.
approving the minutes.
Hang on.
Thank you.
You approve the minutes, Joey?
Got a motion?
Do I have a second to approve the minutes?
Second.
We have a second from Tom. Any objections? We approve the minutes. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The ones that were presented, the corrected version of the minutes that were presented to us at the beginning of the meeting.
Correct.
Yes.
I didn't
Got
see
it.
that. I didn't see
It is 6:42 PM. The meeting is adjourned.